Magical World War I. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 576, Menelman Solo. Charlotte raised his hand to signal not to disturb these people. Although he had the ability to kill or even capture these people, they were obviously small pawns after the New World immigrants, and they were not worthy of knowing too many secrets. Charlotte needed to find a few New World immigrants with status so that he could force them to tell more things. Under the transformation of the orcs, he could not use the ability of Bloody Glory. If he used the power of the Holy Level, he had to strike hard and then escape with all his strength, not giving the evil god lurking in Manai's city time to react. Romeus, Cresto, Menelman and Princess May all understood what Charlotte meant. No one made any move, watching these people walk into the street full of plants, occasionally reaching out to take something from the people on the roadside. Charlotte observed for a while, unable to suppress her anger, and said lightly, "They are harvesting food." Romeo sighed and said, "Duke Mecklen. Aren't all people in the New World like this?" Charlotte nodded and replied, "I know." Of course Charlotte knew, he had been to the New World, and the people he met in the New World were quite normal, not as crazy as these people in front of him. They can exterminate a city without any moral burden, and grow some special food in the bodies of the residents of this city, and take a batch of ripe fruits from their bodies every day. Treat the same humans as livestock. Charlotte took a deep breath and thought, "I will find the culprit and kill him." The five of them worked together, and they really had the strength to kill an ordinary saint in a short time. Even if it was a strong saint, they could kill it. Charlotte and the others observed for a while, then bypassed a building and continued to sneak into the city center. Most of the immigrants from the New World chose to settle in the city after landing. The natives here had been completely exterminated by them using the power of the evil god, so this group of people chose to settle down in the most luxurious buildings in the city, including the government departments of Manai's and the mansions of the nobles, and regarded themselves as the new masters of this city. They don't need to work at ordinary times, and rely on harvesting the food grown in the bodies of local residents as their staple food. When they don't go out to collect food, they close the door and entertain themselves at home, and don't even communicate with each other. Charlotte can see that the demeanor of this group of people is not normal. Although they still maintain self-awareness and various human behaviors, he believes that this group of people is not far from being harvested by the evil god. Charlotte and his group walked around and found the outside of the palace of Manai's. Although the Amazon kingdom is a small country, the palace is built with great momentum, even not inferior to the palaces of Fars and Ingrama. It can be imagined how much heavy taxes the people of the Amazon kingdom have to pay in order to build this palace. Even in the 5 great empires, only a very prodigal emperor would dare to build this luxurious palace. Most palaces were built slowly over several generations. Although the demise of the Amazon kingdom had nothing to do with whether the royal family loved the people like their own children and cherished the people's strength, Charlotte couldn't help thinking, when I go back to Mecklenburg, I will publish a story about a king's excessive luxury, which led to a natural disaster and destroyed the country. However, don't mention the name of the Amazon kingdom, otherwise it will become an attack on the victim country. Romeo suddenly whispered, "Duke Mecklen, someone is coming out." Charlotte focused slightly because he saw an acquaintance, the girl Zimmerman. He was very surprised to see an acquaintance here, but he had no urge to say hello. Although he and this Zimmerman had fought side by side, they had no friendship. However, he did not make any movement, but Menelman beside him trembled slightly, then gently reached out and stroked Charlotte's back, whispering, "When you go back, tell my father that Menel misses him." Then he rushed out without hesitation, and the orc transformation on his body was instantly lifted, and he restored the style of the first rose of the empire. The longsword in his hand chopped down the girl Zimmerman. Charlotte was shocked, and he also hurriedly changed back to human form, roaring, "Be careful to hide, don't make a move." He pushed the light agility to the limit, with a blood rose in his hand, and rushed past Menelman. Menelman gritted his teeth, accelerated the sword light, and exerted the sword skills he had learned in his life to the peak. The young girl Zimmerman did not expect that an enemy would suddenly attack, and it was a great enemy of the saint level. She hurriedly gathered her fighting spirit, but although she had swallowed too many fragments of divinity, she was only a high-level extraordinary person. How could she resist Menelman's full-strength sword? When she was dying, She saw Charlotte, with a slight surprise on her face, and made an expression of asking for help, but before she could call for help, she was split in half by Menelman's sword. Menelman slashed out with a sword, but did not wait for the expected interception of Charlotte Mecklen. She could not help but be slightly surprised. Just as she was about to speak, Charlotte's blood rose suddenly attacked. A swordlight flew out from the body of the young Earl Zimmerman. The swordlight changed magnificently and was as blazing as the sun. Menelman did not expect that there would be such a change. She had just used all her strength and could not recover her breath at this time. Although she held the sword across her chest, she knew that she would definitely not be able to resist it. But Charlotte's blood rose changed like lightning, and she did not retreat a step and took on this round of strong attack. All this happened in a flash. The appearance of the young Earl Zimmerman, Menelman's attack, Charlotte's pursuit. But the script did not follow the flow as it should have. Menelman killed the young Earl Zimmerman with one sword. After the young Earl Zimmerman died, a sword flew out of her body. It should have killed Menelman, but it was caught by Charlotte. Menelman regrouped and stared at the man who seemed to have walked out of nothingness. There was a burning flame in her eyes. She whispered, "Woo woo woo." Charlotte reached out and covered the mouth of the senior sister, and said with a smile, "Captain Huntington, how are you?" The body of the young Earl Zimmerman disappeared into the air inch by inch like a bubble. The man who walked out of nothingness was handsome like a god, with a demeanor and spirit unparalleled in the world. It was Zimmerman Axel Robin. He smiled and said, "Lord Mecklen, you really love to joke. You have polluted my memory several times. Do you still want to try?" Charlotte loosened her hand that was covering Menelman's mouth, stroked her hair, and said helplessly, "We have to try it. What if it succeeds? Long time no see, Mr. Zimmerman Axel Robin." Zimmerman also gave a graceful imperial salute and said, "It's been a long time indeed. Mr. Charlotte Mecklen." Chapter 577 Lord Mecklen, you deserve to die. Because of Charlotte's last-minute instructions, the three people who were hiding were all confused. They couldn't figure out what was going on. In fact, Charlotte was also confused. When Menelman tried to kill the girl Zimmerman, he knew something was wrong, so he immediately disregarded everything and restored his human identity, pushing the light agility technique to the limit, but not to stop his senior from killing the girl Zimmerman. He knew that once the girl died, there would be strange changes, so he had to save her, save senior Menelman. Although Menelman knew some secrets, she couldn't understand why Charlotte reacted so quickly. When she saw her making a move, she immediately rushed over to protect herself. Only Zimmerman had a helpless look on his face, but his tone was as cold as frost and snow, and he said, "Lord Charlotte Mecklen, why do you always want to ruin my good things? Even Menil doesn't know the secret of my memory hiding. How do you know that I hid the memories deep in the souls of those illegitimate children? And I changed their surnames to Mecklen. Do you know that this small change almost made me lost and I could never find my way back? Also, what kind of tricks did you play with a little Zimmerman who gave birth to me? You almost made me think that you were my father, you bastard. And last time, you said to the memory I hid in Wood Brandon's mirror world, 'Are you my brother-in-law?' My brother-in-law in your face, Lord Mecklen, you really deserve to die." Charlotte shrugged her shoulders and said, "Senior Zimmerman, I definitely didn't mean it. I really didn't know that these things would hinder you. Well, actually, I'm your fan." Charlotte was about to continue talking nonsense when she heard Menelman say lightly, "I instructed Mr. Mecklen to do all this, and he didn't know anything at all. I've been looking for you for a long time. This time, let's make a break." A black full moon appeared on Menelman's body, and the rapier in his hand was like smoke, moonlight, flowing light, breeze, and night stars. It changed and moved in an instant, and seemed to have endless artistic conception. Even though Charlotte thought that her swordsmanship was already advanced, she couldn't help but feel ashamed when she saw this sword, knowing that she was far inferior to this senior sister in swordsmanship. The rapier in Zimmerman's hand looked ordinary, as if it was just an ordinary Sherlock-style magic rapier, but in his hand, it was like a divine weapon used by the gods to punish mortals. With a flash of the sword, it broke through Menelman's ever-changing swordsmanship. Charlotte joined the battle group without hesitation. He knew that although he had sparred with Julian before, no matter how talented Julian was, he would never be able to beat Menelman and Zimmerman in swordsmanship due to his age. So in addition to being fast, he abandoned all changes and moves and did not hold back on every sword. The sword light swayed like a stream of light, and it was as fast as lightning. He didn't know how many swords he had thrown around Zimmerman, and he had fixed this powerful man who roamed the continent on the spot, and he couldn't take the opportunity to counterattack and severely injure his ex-fiancée. After a round of quick swordplay, Charlotte was ecstatic and shouted, "He hasn't recovered his strength yet, he's only at the 19th level." Zimmerman smiled and said, "Below the saint level are all ants. Above the saint level, the level is no longer important. What's important is the supernatural powers mastered, combat experience, and basic qualities, such as speed and understanding of swordsmanship. Even if I'm only at the 19th level, killing a few 24th level trash is still a piece of cake." This sentence would be bragging if anyone said it. Even if Charlotte said it, it would sound a bit pretentious. Only Zimmerman said it calmly, as if he was stating a fact. While calmly taking on the siege of Mendelman and Charlotte, Zimmerman asked curiously, "Sir Mecklen, how did you guess how I passed the 4 levels of the god level? I believe that I will never reveal it to anyone. Even my father, my mother, and even Manil don't know. Besides, I don't believe that anyone in the world can come up with such a genius idea as me. I finally encountered something that I can't figure out no matter how hard I try. If Sir Mecklen is willing to tell me the answer, I can spare Manil's life. Haha, you don't have to think about it, I will definitely kill you." After Zimmerman said these words, he blinked at Charlotte. He was obviously a peerless devil, but he suddenly became as innocent as a child, but this innocence, of course, made people shudder. Charlotte took a deep breath and said, "Why do you keep calling me Lord Mecklen?" Zimmerman didn't expect Charlotte's thoughts to jump out so quickly. He couldn't help but smile and said, "My mother, Princess Axel, is about to marry that old man Mecklen-Breton. In any sense, I am the future prince of the Brittany dynasty. Is it strange to call you Lord Mecklen? You know, my succession order is not lower than Antonio's." Charlotte asked this question just to ease Zimmerman's aggressive momentum and buy herself some time to think. He believed that Zimmerman must be invincible when he was at his peak, but he didn't believe that Zimmerman, who had just recovered to the 19th level, could also be invincible. What's more, wasn't Zimmerman, who was invincible at the time, also besieged and captured alive? He and Mendelman were not fighting alone. There were also Romeo's, Cresto, and Princess May-Guillaume behind them. This book's strength was definitely not inferior to Antonio and the 5 great royal family strongmen of Axel. However, he did not see the opportunity to fight back for a while, so he did not call the 3 helpers to come up. At the same time, he was also very curious about what Zimmerman mentioned just now, the 4 heavenly gates of the god level. He recently read the notes left by his teacher Juno, and it was vaguely mentioned that there might be several difficulties in reaching the god level, but Juno only confirmed 3 of them, and the rest were vague, only listing a few attempts without giving a conclusion. Zimmerman swung away Mendelman's sword and urged, "Sir Mecklen, make your choice quickly. Menil is waiting anxiously. I also want to know whether this secret is more important to you than Mendelman." Charlotte took a deep breath and said, "This secret is not only not as important as senior sister Mendelman, but it is actually not worth a few centimes. I thought of a question as early as when I was at the University of Sheffield. What is this universe made of? Is it mathematics, physics, or the universe? The stars in the universe? Of course, we can rule out a wrong answer first. That is, it is definitely not the gods." Chapter 578 God of War and Chaos. Although Charlotte is a math teacher, she is a science student and has a good knowledge of physics, chemistry and astronomy. At least it is enough to fool the old world. Charlotte can pat her chest and say, "No one in this continent has more scientific knowledge than me." Charlotte talked freely and occasionally asked a sharp question. Zimmerman would sometimes answer, sometimes think and then ignore it, but Charlotte gradually summarized some truths through Zimmerman's reaction. He thought secretly, "Teacher said that if you want to step into the divine rank, the first hurdle is the physical body. Below the holy rank, you are still immortal. It is absolutely impossible to withstand the ascension to the divine rank. You must withstand the energy blowing from countless dimensional voids. That's why the main body was born. With the help of the hugeness of the main body, it condensed into the most powerful magic array to resist the power scour of the dimensional void. That's why the divine body was born. The divine body composed entirely of energy can walk freely in countless spaces. That's why gods stay away from humans, because their ties with the material world are already extremely weak. The second is the soul. The mortal body cannot withstand the energy from the void, from the dimension, and from countless spaces. The mortal soul cannot withstand the terrifying divine thoughts emitted by countless divine creatures in infinite space. For most divine creatures, the moment they ascend to the divine rank, their souls collapse, leaving only pure flesh, and relying on the memories of their previous lives, they form a creature without consciousness that can only follow the rules of instinct, or, they don't deserve to be called creatures. The third is consciousness. Finally comes the power of the gods. There is almost no answer to the problem of consciousness. The power that seems to be the most difficult may be the simplest. Charlotte decided to take a risk. She swung the blood rose and blocked all of Zimmerman's attacks. She pulled Mendelman out of the battle and said lightly, "Thus I made a bold guess. Why can't we ascend to the divine level first, and then overcome these difficulties?" Zimmerman maintained his attacking posture, but did not move, muttering to himself, "Ascend to the divine level first, and then overcome the difficulties. Ascend to the divine level first, Sir Mecklin. You really have a genius idea. It's bolder than mine, but it hits the mark. Describe the best shortcut to ascend to the divine level." "I'm not as crazy as you. I only thought of a specific way to do it. As you know, I found some lovers. The blazing flames in Mendelman's eyes were enough to burn any evil god. Then I had some illegitimate children, and I hid my memories deep in the souls of these children. Then I asked Wood Brandon to help." Zimmerman shrugged and said, "Sir Mecklin, why are you looking at me like that? Wood Brandon is my man. Is there anything strange about that? He has lived for hundreds of years. How could he turn a blind eye to the secret of becoming a god?" Wood Brandon was almost going crazy wanting to become a god, and I easily convinced him. Anyway, this vampire from the Van Gogh clan had no loyalty to Fars. He was willing to be the prime minister of the empire just to enjoy the feeling of being second only to one person, above everyone else. Holding great power and being able to call the wind and rain, it's not strange to abandon a little power when there is something he desires more. Anyway, in a few decades, he can change his identity and infiltrate a certain power center of an empire. Next time maybe Ingrima, or Black Phoenix. Oh, Black Phoenix has been killed by you," Charlotte replied. "It's not me. Don't talk nonsense. It's a misunderstanding." Zimmerman gave him a disdainful look and didn't even bother to argue with him. "Anyway, I was successfully captured alive and sent to Kilmainham prison, where the Emerald Book wiped out the remnants of my memory. Thanks to this great alchemical artifact, I was able to clean up the stubborn garbage in my memory and restore it to the purity and flawlessness of a baby. Only such a soul could withstand the impact of the will of those monsters from the infinite space to ascend to the god level. Anyway, it's a blank sheet of paper. No matter how they impact it, they won't erase anything more." Charlotte couldn't help but admire. "What a great idea, but you made such a big move. It shouldn't be just for such a small thing." Zimmerman smiled and said, "You're right. I also got the authority of war and chaos. You can call me the god of war and chaos." Charlotte smiled and said mercilessly, "Although I don't know what's wrong with you, I know for sure that you haven't ascended to the god level yet. You are both level 5 like me. Why are you pretending to be a great god?" Zimmerman finally couldn't hold it in and cursed, "Who is level 5 like you?" Charlotte groaned a few times and said, "Sorry, I don't know how to count, math teacher." "You don't know how to count?" Mr. Zimmerman. Axel Robin will never understand this cold joke. He just thinks that Charlotte's words are very meaningful. But he can't figure out what profound truth it contains. Zimmerman clearly feels that his memory has been polluted by Charlotte Mecklin, this bastard. He couldn't help but reiterate what he said just now. "Lord Charlotte Mecklin, you really deserve to die. Let's not talk about all the bad things you've done. You actually tried to get your hands on my Manny. I haven't even touched her. Just for this reason, you should be exiled to the void and given to those evil gods to play with." Charlotte sighed and said, "It's too late. I've been given to the evil gods to play with. Forget it. Let's not talk about this sad question. Let's talk about why you haven't ascended to the level of a god yet." This time, Zimmerman answered seriously, "I still need time. The war is not over yet. I want the war to sweep across the old world again. When the war reaches its most intense, it will be my chance to become a god." Speaking of this, Lord Charlotte Mecklin, if you hadn't run around and ended the war in the old world ahead of time, I wouldn't have to take action yourself and manipulate the people of the new world to fight this war. I'll kill you here. And I will keep my promise and let many go. For this beautiful world, the war is in full swing. Please die. It would be best if you could commit suicide. Charlotte pondered for a moment and fell into deep thought. Zimmerman had a strange feeling about him. Charlotte was obviously just a small figure, but she repeatedly ruined his plans. She was simply a nemesis from heaven. This time he really wanted to kill this annoying guy. "You even want to seduce his fiancée, asshole. You don't know what you are talking about." Chapter 579. You are not a god of war and chaos. You are the god of war and betrayal. Charlotte Mecklen. What are you still thinking about? Charlotte looked at Zimmerman, who had not taken any action but just persuaded her to die. Suddenly, she smiled and said, "You just lied. You are not the god of war and chaos." Charlotte said word by word, "You are the god of war and betrayal. You need an anchor point to become a god. That's why Senior Mendelman doesn't want to live. Her recent behavior is completely abnormal. She is like a love-brained girl. She is not the first rose of the empire at all. You told Senior Mendelman all the secrets a long time ago. At the same time, you also betrayed her severely." Zimmerman Axel. Mr. Mecklen. You are so good at playing tricks. Zimmerman had a smile on his face, but when he heard the last sentence, Zimmerman Axel. Mr. Mecklen, his face changed drastically, and he roared in a low voice, "My last name is not Mecklen." Charlotte spread her hands and said indifferently, "It doesn't matter if your last name is not Axel. Anyway, your last name was not Axel." Zimmerman shouted, "My last name is not Mecklen." Charlotte continued, "It's okay if you don't have the last name Robin. Anyway, your family has abandoned you a long time ago. It's better to have the last name Mecklen. Our Mecklen family is in its heyday." Zimmerman's brilliant swordlight responded to him, but this time it was Mendelman who took action and blocked the attack for Charlotte. Charlotte Bloodrose took action and joined the battle. This time, the three of them did not stop, and the battle became more and more intense. Romeos was shocked and whispered to his two companions, "We really heard something extraordinary." Cresta was a little regretful. He whispered, "I haven't been promoted to the 24th level yet. Even if I know the secret, it's useless." The expression on Princess May's face changed the most. Mendelman acted like this because he knew he would die this time, but Princess May Guillaume was not like that. She really fell in love with Charlotte, especially with Mendelman as a competitor. Her performance became more and more intense. When Charlotte first appeared, she was just an inconspicuous diplomatic envoy, and she was hinted at by her nephew, the Red Dragon Emperor Alfred Guillaume, which made her laugh and cry. She knew that her nephew was worried about her, afraid that she would become autistic and unable to get out of the shadow of darkness, but she really didn't think about starting another relationship. But this Mr. Charlotte Mecklen was really amazing. He actually started directly from her favorite novel and wrote one amazing work after another. Each one made her unable to stop reading and really hide her heart. As for later, Charlotte actually gave her a legendary battleship. Although Princess May was angry that this bastard even lent the Queen Bee to Sophia Galinold, the Rose Lady of Strasbourg, but seeing that he worked hard to collect the gold ring for the control of the Queen Bee and the crystal bottle for her collection, Princess May still forgave him. As for what happened later, May Guillaume couldn't figure out when she would feel that even if she took off her silk gloves and went out to fight a bunch of bitches, she wouldn't feel that there was anything wrong. Even if Charlotte had an, "So what?" A man from Fars had a lover who was Princess Ingrama. Isn't that a very honorable thing? In Charlotte's latest work, 10,000 Nights, there is a classic line. A man's honor comes from the woman around him. It is 100% Charlotte Mecklen's inner monologue. May Guillaume suddenly sighed when she saw Mendelman fighting. Her qualifications were almost the same as Mendelman's, but Mendelman took the lead and was promoted to the 23rd level. And from her battle, you can tell that Charlotte's senior sister Manil had already burned her life. She gave up everything to kill Zimmerman. Princess May took a deep breath and said, "Let's prepare to attack." Romeus pondered for a moment and whispered, "Okay." He knew that he should turn around and leave decisively. Even in the New World, he could hear the reputation of Zimmerman. If he participated in the siege of Zimmerman, he would definitely die, but the benefits were completely disproportionate. But Romeus weighed the pros and cons again and again, and finally abandoned his distracting thoughts and decided to help Charlotte. He also wanted to know where the gap between his strength and a monster like Zimmerman was. Cresta agreed without hesitation. Romeus and Cresta were both experienced warriors. The two of them found a flaw in Zimmerman, one after the other, and attacked almost at the same time, rising from the ground and turning into two brilliant rainbows, crossing in the air, and cutting off Zimmerman's two arms. Princess May's pink fighting spirit then erupted and wrapped around one of the arms. Although Zimmerman was attacked and severely injured, he was not afraid and shouted, "Give me your hand back." The arm that was not wrapped by Princess May's fighting spirit did not fall down, but flew back to Zimmerman's shoulder as fast as lightning and grew back quickly. Seeing this, Princess May stirred her fighting spirit and shattered the wrapped arm. Zimmerman smiled and shouted, "Grow." Immediately, a second arm grew out of his shoulder. However, What shocked the 5 people who besieged him was that the second arm he grew was on the same shoulder as the arm he had received. Charlotte shook her head and said, "I said, you are not the god of war and chaos. You are the god of war and betrayal. Look, even your own hands are going to betray you." Zimmerman was furious. He swung his sword to cut off the second arm, pressed it on the other shoulder, and shouted, "Charlotte Mecklen, even if you have helpers, what can you do to me? This is not a siege planned by Wood Brandon, and I will never surrender." Charlotte shook her head and said, "Wood Brandon may be persuaded by you, but he must have betrayed you that time, otherwise you wouldn't be so confused." Zimmerman suddenly closed his eyes. His expression was ferocious and changed in an instant. He changed countless expressions, making him look like countless people. After a long time, he opened his eyes. His temperament suddenly changed, and he returned to the elegant appearance when he first appeared. He put one hand on his chest, smiled slightly, and said, "Lord Charlotte Mecklen, this time it's all thanks to you. I've always felt something was wrong, but I couldn't find the problem, so this is the truth. To repay you, I will kill all of you here." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 580 Charlotte. You must have cheated. Charlotte didn't know what Zimmerman had figured out, but no matter what he had figured out, it was too dangerous for her. Charlotte shouted loudly, "Attack together, don't show any mercy." Before he finished speaking, Zimmerman appeared beside Princess May like a ghost, and cut Princess Ingrima's neck with a palm knife. There was no sign before he attacked. Although Princess May's fighting spirit changed and she wanted to get rid of Zimmerman, even Charlotte and others also attacked quickly, but Zimmerman still hit Princess May Guillaume hard. Princess May's body was illusory and disappeared into the air in an instant. Charlotte was anxious and relieved when she saw this, knowing that this was the dawn of fate that sent May Guillaume away in time and prevented the tragedy from happening. Charlotte thought that she had taken this man who dominated the world very seriously, but she didn't expect that when Zimmerman got serious, she could only watch him severely injure Princess May. If it weren't for the gift of the Serpent of Destiny, he would have regretted it for the rest of his life. Zimmerman was slightly surprised and asked, "What kind of superpower is this? You can actually escape my fatal blow." Charlotte put the blood rose into her arm and said lightly, "Your attack just now almost killed a friend of mine, so I can't allow you to live." Zimmerman smiled slightly, shrugged his shoulders, and said, "Who makes her the weakest? Of course I have to kill the worst opponent first, but it's been a long time since someone boasted to me like this. Let me see how many surprises you can give me." Charlotte took a deep breath and said, "Let me level up first." He didn't make any moves, nor did he have any signs, but in the next moment, he broke through from the 20th level to the 21st level. This time, Charlotte put all his upgrade energy into Insight. Insight is one of the 13 skills of Bloody Glory and the first ability he comprehended. But he didn't invest in this ability for a long time. It was the last time, because after upgrading the main skills, there was still some residual energy, which he invested in Insight and upgraded this skill to X12. At this time, Charlotte urgently needed instant combat power. As a math teacher, he quickly built a mathematical model in his brain, and used the crudest algorithm to come to an incredible conclusion. The ability that can most instantly improve his combat power is actually Insight. As a math teacher, Charlotte has always believed in two things. One is, mathematics is mathematics, and you can't say you don't know it. The other is that mathematics is mathematics. As long as the formula is correct and the calculation is not wrong, then the conclusion must be correct, no matter how incredible it is. Charlotte didn't know whether the mathematical model he built was correct for such a complicated thing, nor did he know whether the data he used was correct, but he still decided to believe in mathematics. After all, mathematics is more reliable than anything else. Even if it is wrong, he is willing to accept it. As a math teacher, he was willing to bet all his dignity on math. With only a small amount of his supernatural power, his insight was raised to X18. As Charlotte continued to invest energy, the 18 insight runes broke together and formed a brand new rune, Omniscience. Omniscience includes two parts, all, and knowledge. Its non-religious meaning is not knowing everything, but being able to learn all knowledge. But when the omniscience rune took shape, Charlotte's repeated contact with evil gods and even the spirituality of the righteous gods was like water encountering a sponge, like oil encountering a raging fire, and was ignited in an instant. Charlotte's spirituality exceeded the ordinary holy order, even Antonio and Romeo's, the peak holy order, but his spirituality was not a talent, nor a normal state. This spirituality that was raised by contact with gods was extremely unstable and could get out of control at any time. Charlotte could not release all her spirituality at will to improve her practice. But when the insight was promoted to X18, and it was broken and reorganized into omniscience, this rune condensed, and he could accommodate all his spirituality. This was something Charlotte had never expected. With the energy of the upgrade, the omniscience rune was continuously injected, and the second omniscience rune condensed. When the second omniscience rune condensed, Charlotte felt that his brain was suddenly replaced with a CPU. The speed of thinking suddenly increased, and his memory, perception, and talent all doubled. He even calculated a high-level math problem in his mind. It would have taken at least several hours to get the answer to a complex problem with pen and paper. Charlotte completed all the calculations in just a few seconds. The remaining energy was not enough to improve the omniscience ability again. Charlotte put them all into the blood flame energy, which increased this ability to X5. Charlotte said she wanted to upgrade, and in an instant she was promoted to the 21st level. It was simply shocking to the whole audience, even Zimmerman was shocked. He couldn't help but say, "This is the most pretentious posture I've ever seen, Charlotte. You must have cheated, you've already been promoted to level 21, you just fooled me, right?" Charlotte smiled and said, "Whatever you say is right." Everyone saw that Charlotte was promoted to level 21, but no one could see that he transformed his insight into omniscience and condensed the second omniscience rune. As for the blood flame energy, that's not important, it just consumes the remaining energy for the promotion. Zimmerman stopped talking nonsense. He was a little tired of Charlotte's playing tricks. He took out all his skills, made a feint to the east and attacked in the west, rushed left and right, and attacked Romeo's, Cresto, Menelman and Charlotte one by one. The battle between the two sides was much more intense than before. Although Zimmerman immediately realized that Charlotte's strength had indeed become stronger, he didn't care much, just thinking that Charlotte had hidden her strength before. Charlotte soon discovered that although her combat power had been improved, it was not the power itself that had been improved, but the wisdom of how to use the power. If this kind of improvement was used against enemies of the same level, it would make the enemy suspect that the world was cheating. However, it did not have an immediate effect against an enemy like Zimmerman. However, Charlotte Mecklen soon found the most suitable way to fight. She no longer used weapons, but kept condensing the magic mirror and used it as a shield. It could not only be used to block Zimmerman's attacks, but it even almost took Zimmerman into the mirror world several times. The attacks collected by the magic mirror could be respitted out at any time. It was simply a magical version of the shifting of the stars, the moving of flowers and jade, and the great movement of the universe. Such a unique combat skill gave Zimmerman a slight headache. Chapter 581, Zimmerman, the Horror of the World. Charlotte manipulated a magic mirror, trying to block a killing move for Crester, but Zimmerman had already found a way to deal with him. This blow shook the energy that was everywhere in the world and directly shattered the fragile magic mirror. Charlotte secretly admired it. The magic mirror and the real mirror have a common shortcoming, which is fragility. However, this fragility is not on the magic mirror itself. It is embedded in nothingness and does not have to bear any substance. The fragility of the magic mirror lies in its connection with this world. This connection is very fragile. Once it is disturbed, the magic mirror will disappear. Charlotte believes that even an enemy who has fought dozens of times may not be able to see through this, but Zimmerman just found this flaw casually. This blow was a deliberate and targeted attack. The energy of this blow was dispersed, and it could not cause substantial damage to the strong stage saint level, but it could destroy the existence of the magic mirror. Charlotte also thought of a way to deal with Zimmerman's attack. However, Zimmerman lured Charlotte and Romeus to rescue Cresto, but his real target was his ex-fiancée, Menelman. He used a sharp and unparalleled great brilliant cross/to send Menelman out of the battlefield. Charlotte watched Menelman disappear into the air. Although she knew that the dawn of destiny had played a role again, she was also shocked and horrified. She didn't expect Zimmerman to be so fierce. Under the siege of 5 saints, he was still at ease, and even severely injured Princess May and Mendelman one after another. If it weren't for the dawn of destiny, these two ladies would have died. Charlotte couldn't help but complain. Zimmerman, he just called out Zimmerman's name, but he couldn't think of how to complain. Charlotte Mecklen, who always thought she was sharp in her words, finally ran out of words. He shouted, "Romeus, Cresto! Retreat, I will cover you." Although the Serpent of Fate had granted 10 Dawn of Fate, this thing was extremely precious and there was no need to waste it in a meaningless battle. Charlotte asked Romeus and Cresto to retreat first, which immediately won Romeus' favor. He saluted Charlotte slightly and turned to fly away. Cresto had been under Charlotte for a long time and knew the temperament of this lord. He valued the lives of his subordinates too much. Although this was not decisive enough, it really made his subordinates like him easily, so he also retreated at the same time. For Cresto, there was no need to salute. His loyalty no longer needed to be bound by formalities. Charlotte could not defeat Zimmerman, but he could hold Zimmerman back. His agility increased to X27, and with the bonus of the red and blue rattlesnake, his speed was the best in the world. Moreover, he had awakened the omniscience. No matter what kind of fighting skills Zimmerman used, he could understand and learn the essence by observing, so that Zimmerman's various magical methods no longer had any secrets. Zimmerman was also very troubled by Charlotte's slippery opponent. Charlotte intended to cover for his two subordinates, but Zimmerman didn't want to let them go. After all, Romeus was at the 24th level and Cresto was at the 23rd level, and they were qualified to threaten him. Zimmerman also knew that Charlotte had more than a few saints under her command. If dozens of them rushed over next time, he might really be overturned. Although he didn't know what kind of supernatural power it was that the opponent could be killed at a glance, but disappeared quietly, he was very sure that this supernatural power must not be used at will, otherwise they would come one after another, and he would definitely die in battle. If he could injure them once, he could reduce the harm in the future. Zimmerman changed his tactics several times in a row, and even Charlotte almost fell for it. Finally, Zimmerman cheated Charlotte for the 7th time and knocked him to the ground. Zimmerman did not chase Charlotte, but flew at full speed to chase Romeus and Cresto. Zimmerman soon saw the backs of the two men, and sent out a great cross-radiant slash. Suddenly, the magic power on his body shook slightly. A man who looked very gentle, holding a knight's lance, stabbed hard and pierced Zimmerman's body. Charlotte saw from a distance that Ishmael, holding the lance transformed by the blood spirit, finally injured Zimmerman, and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He had been brewing from the beginning, so that Ishmael would take action at the most critical moment, so when dealing with Zimmerman, he took great pains to attach a magic mirror to his body. At this time, he seized the moment when Zimmerman sent out the great cross-radiant slash with all his strength, and attacked him by surprise, and it really worked in one fell swoop. But Charlotte soon found that she was too relaxed too early. Zimmerman reached out and grasped the spear, and kicked the magic mirror to pieces with one foot. This blow even caused a blazing light damage, which severely injured the undead Ishmael. The whole body of this evil god was ignited by the power of light ash, turning into a blazing torch. Charlotte no longer cared about Ishmael. He was at full speed, but he watched Zimmerman pull out the knight's lance and throw it with all his strength. Charlotte did not dare to take the shot back or resist it. She quickly moved aside, but saw that Zimmerman ignored her and turned to chase Romeus and Cresto. Charlotte did not dare to lose this weapon, so she turned around to chase, but she saw from a distance that a mirror opened from the void, an arm stretched out, and grabbed the knight's lance. Wood Brandon came out with a smile and said, "Hello again, Duke Mecklen. Last time, Charlotte used the Holy Light Kingdom and Emilia to scare Wood Brandon away, but this former Prime Minister of the Empire is definitely a very formidable opponent." Charlotte let out a long roar and suddenly accelerated. Although Wood Brandon wanted to keep this weapon, he felt something was wrong when he got the knight's spear transformed by Blood Spirit Rhino. It was as if he was holding an angry evil god. Waves of evil god power vibrated out from the spear. He was about to exile this knight's spear when Charlotte rushed over. Although Wood Brandon thought to himself that he could definitely exile this strange knight's spear, it would take time to exile it. Seeing this, he could only smile helplessly and loosened his hand holding Blood Spirit Rhino. The knight's spear broke away from his grip and immediately flew back to Charlotte like a flexible swordfish. Charlotte reached out and grasped the knight's lance, and without hesitation attacked Wood Brandon. Wood Brandon looked into the distance, smiled slightly, and said, "It's not time to start a war yet." Then he disappeared into the mirror world. Charlotte didn't stay and immediately chased Zimmerman with all her strength, but when he caught up with Zimmerman, he saw that he had severely injured Crester, and this loyal subordinate also turned into a stream of light and disappeared. Charlotte took a deep breath and once again felt the horror of Zimmerman. Chapter 582. Someone turned into a gorilla. When Zimmerman saw Charlotte catching up, he surprisingly did not continue to fight, but withdrew from the battle circle, looked at Charlotte deeply, and turned to fly towards Manise. Charlotte hesitated for a moment and said to Romeus, "You go back to the ship first, I will go with him." Romeus nodded and said, "Be careful." He had just tried to communicate with the evil god desperately, but Zimmerman inexplicably gave up the fight, which made him very surprised. The only explanation was that the shot that Charlotte let Ishmaelin sneak attack severely injured Zimmerman. However, Romeus would never dare to gamble, but Charlotte was obviously different. He was ready to gamble once. Charlotte knew that Woodbrandon also appeared nearby, but still wanted to gamble once, betting that Zimmerman was seriously injured. He did not fly over openly, but extended his blood energy as much as possible, condensed a magic mirror in a very far distance, and then used the world in the mirror to jump into the magic mirror, using this method to advance towards Manise at a very fast speed. In the mirror world, no one could sneak attack Charlotte. Moreover, the magic mirror is equivalent to an alternate dimension, which is integrated with countless worlds. As long as it reflects the blue sky and white clouds, it is difficult to be discovered. Charlotte soon found Zimmerman's trail, but he was not anxious. He still used this method to rush to Manise. He did not rush over from the sky, but appeared on the ground, still transformed into an orc, a red bear warrior, and appeared outside Manise, which had transformed into a strange thing. Charlotte slightly moved his muscles and bones, and his bloodthirsty fighting spirit suddenly boiled up, breaking through directly from the low level to the middle level, and breaking through 3 times in a row in one breath, and then stopped the promotion. Charlotte broke 18 insight runes, condensed omniscience, and thoroughly digested all spirituality. In terms of pure talent, he is already the best in the entire continent. Well, it is the best in the old continent and the new continent. Bloodthirsty Dao Qi broke through to the 9th level. Charlotte easily condensed 3 new runes. He turned into a crossback red bear warrior. Bloodthirsty Dao Qi condensed a total of 8 supernatural runes, namely, bear strength, rage, thick skin, bone refining, gluttony, hibernation, bloodthirstiness, and king's mandate. Bone refining can make the bones of bear warriors harder. While the bones are hard, they can also increase strength and blood production. Gluttony can recover injuries and physical strength by eating a lot. Hibernation can rely on sleep after eating a lot to recover from serious injuries. Bloodthirstiness is similar to rage, doubly increasing the ultimate combat power. King's mandate is different from these combat and auxiliary supernatural powers. Only when the orc awakens the king's mandate can he be qualified to become the king of a tribe. The king's mandate allows orcs to easily defeat stronger and more majestic peers in battles of the same level, and can suppress supernatural powers such as rage and bloodthirstiness, so that the enemy's combat power is unknowingly weakened. Charlotte's 9th order bloodthirsty fighting spirit caused a subtle tremor throughout his body. All the strange plants that wanted to drill into his body would be shattered and withered and yellowed after being exposed to this strange tremor, losing their strange vitality. Charlotte calmly walked into Manise again. The street was the same as last time. He quietly lurked near the palace and directly changed into a silver-backed bear man who was good at climbing. He changed into a silver-backed ape man. The supernatural power in Charlotte's body was transformed into another 8 bloodthirsty runes: King Kong, rage, throwing, pulling tendons, refining bone, dexterity, giantization, and spirit hair. Fierce intentions, rage, and refining bone are all universal bloodthirsty runes. Any orc race can condense them. It is not surprising that the silver-backed ape man also condensed one. The remaining dexterity is to increase the balance and flexibility of the body. Whether it is tossing and turning or using weapons, there is a significant bonus. Gigantism is a giant technique that can make the silverback gorilla man grow several times larger and turn into a giant gorilla man. His strength will also increase at the same time, making him extremely powerful and able to move mountains and push mountains. Spirit hair is a strange supernatural power. It can make the gorilla hair on Charlotte's body have a strange ability, allowing the owner's 5 senses to attach to it and transmit part of the power. For example, if Charlotte grabs a random person and puts her gorilla hair on him, she can sense everything that this person sees and hears, and can also grant a very small part of her strength, combat skills, and supernatural powers. In short, it can turn a person into a gorilla. It will make everyone who sees him shout, "Oh oh oh, look! Someone has turned into a gorilla." Charlotte climbed into the palace of the Amazon kingdom and walked around with his agility. In the palace, he saw at least dozens of tree gods, but these tree gods were like real big trees, growing on the ground and motionless. Charlotte had fought with a tree god envoy. Although he easily killed the tree god envoy and fed it to Amun, he also knew that the tree god envoy's strength was not inferior to that of an ordinary saint. Dozens of tree god envoys were enough to flatten any country. Even the four empires would have a hard time resisting them. Charlotte wanted to kill all of these tree god envoys, but he had more important things to do for the time being, so he could only turn a blind eye to them. Charlotte quickly found the old emperor's bedroom in the Amazon kingdom, and he saw Zimmerman there. But it was the young girl Zimmerman. She seemed to have fallen asleep, with a calm expression and no scars on her body. When Charlotte saw her, she was more certain of one thing: Zimmerman was really injured just now, and he had not yet reached the time of birth. Charlotte didn't know how to describe it. Zimmerman was obviously an adult, but at this moment he was not born yet. This thing was really amazing. You can't kill this girl. If you kill her, Zimmerman will come out. How can you prevent Zimmerman from coming out? Make her really pregnant? Damn, what kind of messed up idea is this? I have to be serious. By the way, how did Amabella get pregnant? Can you use that method? Although this method is not serious, it doesn't matter if it's not serious. Saving the world is more important. Charlotte thought for a long time and was about to leave when she saw something at the feet of the girl Zimmerman. A book. A book he had seen before. The Emerald Secret Scroll. Charlotte's heartbeat slowed down by half a beat. After a long while, he activated the blood flame energy and made a move in the air. This textbook made by Master Mani and used in college, known as the highest creation of human alchemy, the highest secret treasure of alchemy, and the Emerald Secret Scroll that represents the highest achievement of human alchemy, fell into Charlotte's hands. Charlotte clutched the Emerald Secret Scroll, and her heartbeat became irregular again, this time extremely irregular. Chapter 583 Welcome to the Emerald Library. When Zimmerman disappeared in the real Kilmainham prison, there was no document mentioning the whereabouts of this alchemical secret treasure. Charlotte thought it was still well stored, but she didn't expect Zimmerman to take it out with him. The Emerald Scroll contains endless knowledge, and Charlotte just condensed one. No. 2 runes of omniscience. Charlotte couldn't imagine what would happen if she got the Emerald Scroll. Charlotte took the Emerald Scroll and turned away. He didn't even care about the tree gods. He wanted to kill them and feed them to Amun and Emilia. Charlotte rushed out of Manise and immediately restored his human body. He urged the power of the Holy Order, soared into the sky, turned in the air, and headed straight for overseas. When he landed on the deck of the Holy Light Kingdom, his heart was still pounding. Seeing Charlotte coming back, Romius looked nervous and wanted to ask, what happened? But Charlotte announced that she would be in seclusion for a few days, so he had no choice but to stop asking. This time, the attack was a heavy loss. Although there were no casualties due to the protection of the Dawn of Destiny, 3 top saints were sent back to Mecklenburg to recuperate in the Great Temple. Only Charlotte and Romius returned. Of course. As the saying goes, some are happy while others are sad. Menelman Sumi and Guillaume withdrew from the battle. Sophia Galinold was really overjoyed. What could be more refreshing than when the enemy disappeared just when you were about to fight with real swords and guns, and the fruits of victory were in sight? Originally, she was still upset about her failure to be promoted to the saint level, but now Miss Galinold only felt that the sentence often used in Charlotte's novels, Cyprus lost his horse? Who knows whether it is a blessing or a curse for him? That sentence made a lot of sense. Note, this is because Charlotte deliberately localized this idiom in order to adapt to the cultural atmosphere of the old world. As for Adosa, she had only one feeling, competing for the sport of the descendants of Charlotte. Shouldn't it be senior sister Menelman and Princess May who should compete? How come it became me and junior sister Sophia Galanid who are on the field? Who is the main force? Charlotte had no other thoughts and returned to her cabin. She wanted to open the Emerald Secret Scroll. But the Emerald Secret Scroll seemed to be sealed by a secret method and could not be opened at all. Charlotte immediately input a bloody glory rule, and then heard an old voice, knowledge is priceless. Anyone who wants to gain knowledge from the Emerald Secret Scroll needs to pay knowledge in exchange. Charlotte's heart sank, and she thought to herself, isn't it just knowledge? I am a math teacher, Can I still act this? He casually listed a dozen formulas on the cover of the Emerald Secret Scroll. After a while, they found themselves in an unusually huge library. A very handsome man said with a smile on his face, VIP number 38. Welcome to the Emerald Library, Charlotte asked curiously. Why am I a VIP? The handsome man said, people who can enter the Emerald Library are divided into 8 levels: visitors, apprentices, scholars, temporary librarians, VIPs, sages, and the director of the Emerald Library. Charlotte asked, is the director the sage Mani? The handsome man smiled and said, yes. Charlotte pondered for a moment and asked, can I obtain all the knowledge in the Emerald Library? The handsome man showed surprise on his face. After a long time, he said, you have an opportunity to infuse knowledge. The previous 37 VIPs have chosen a single direction, but they have not been able to fully bear the knowledge of a single direction. If you choose to bear all the knowledge of the Emerald Library, I am afraid that your soul will explode. Charlotte smiled slightly and said, please infuse me with all the knowledge. The handsome guy panicked a little and tried to persuade Charlotte several times. After being rejected by Charlotte, he could only sigh and said, please stay awake and stop a knowledge infusion at any time. I must remind you that VIPs only have one chance to choose to infuse knowledge. You'd better choose a single direction, Charlotte said lightly. The handsome guy said helplessly, I'll start now. After Charlotte said that she was ready, countless knowledge suddenly flooded into his brain like a flood. Charlotte closed his eyes, and the 2 omniscient runes shone brightly in the depths of his soul. The surging knowledge may be a terrifying force that will make the brain explode for ordinary people, but for him, it is just like bathing in a hot spring. The 2 omniscient runes are like sponges, constantly swallowing the rushing knowledge. The Emerald Book has absorbed a lot of knowledge. Although this first artifact of alchemy is just a replica of the Emerald Book, it surpasses all human creations. For the omniscient, the more knowledge it obtains, the more vast in immensity its power will become. Knowledge can break through the memory, brain, soul, and even consciousness of all living beings. But for the omniscience, the more turbulent the knowledge is, the broader it is. To contain knowledge is like pouring fuel into a burning flame, which will only make it stronger. Charlotte didn't know how long it had been since he had been indoctrinated by the knowledge of the Emerald Book. But he could sense that the 2 omniscience runes were becoming brighter and brighter like daylight. When they were brightest, they split apart and the omniscience runes became X4. The 4 omniscience runes increased Charlotte's speed of receiving knowledge indoctrination by more than 5 or 6 times. The handsome man in charge of managing the Emerald Library was more and more surprised. It was the first time he encountered such a situation. The knowledge contained in the Emerald Book was endless, but this endless knowledge was now being borne by a mere mortal. When the 2 ding-ding prompt sounds resounded throughout the Emerald Library, almost all the existences in this library learned a terrifying thing. Someone was able to bear all the knowledge of the Emerald Book alive. Soon, a group of people gathered around Charlotte. They looked like they were watching giant pandas, or visiting Einstein or Napoleon. They were all very excited, pointing and talking, and couldn't suppress their excitement at all. Charlotte shook his head, and he felt that his head was a little heavy. That was the weight of knowledge. Although he was infused with a huge amount of knowledge, it had not been sorted out yet, and his whole brain was still in a mess. Charlotte smiled slightly, and was about to say goodbye to the handsome guy who managed the library and leave here first, when she heard an old voice saying, I am Mani, who are you? Can you tell me your name? Chapter 584 Master Mani. Haven't you turned into a bunch of eyes of destiny? Charlotte almost blurted out, shouting, Master Mani. Did you turn into a bunch of eyes of destiny? He was deeply impressed by the eyes of destiny. After all, that monster made up of countless faces asked countless questions and tried to erode his consciousness. He was defeated by him using the tactics of the sea of questions and a bunch of math papers. The impression was quite deep. In particular, it was the Serpent of Destiny who told him that the Eye of Destiny was Mani. This news is absolutely 100% correct. The righteous gods must know the secrets of the world. A very old man with an old face that is almost impossible for humans to have appeared in front of Charlotte with a cane made of branches. He smiled slightly and said, Have you encountered the Eye of Destiny? That thing is very troublesome. Charlotte shrugged and said, He asked me some questions, and I asked him some questions. Then the guy made up of countless faces disappeared. The old man showed an incredible look and said, What's wrong with you? He doubted that Charlotte was bragging, but decided to give him a chance. Charlotte tried it, and the Great Emerald Book was definitely not a reality. He used his mind to condense hundreds of test papers and threw them to the old man who claimed to be Mani. The old man picked up the first test paper and showed a little disdain. He threw away the first test paper and looked at the second one, a little more seriously. When he saw 7 or 8 test papers, his face was already solemn. When he saw more than 10, his face, which couldn't be older, was full of sweat. Yes, he couldn't do it at all. Although Charlotte Mecklen was very considerate and marked the mathematical knowledge that needed to be used on the test paper, including but not limited to various mathematical concepts and theorems, the old man who called himself Mani said he couldn't do it, and he couldn't do it, even if he was indeed the greatest alchemist since the birth of magic alchemy. But he still couldn't do these math problems. Mathematics is something that can't be done if you say you can't do it. Even a supernatural being, even one who knows magic, can't do it. Mani collected all the test papers with great care, sighed, and said, "From today on, you are the sage of the Great Emerald Book. As a sage, you have the following powers: automatically serve as a librarian, automatically obtain the succession order of the library director, have the power to designate the infusion of knowledge 5 times, and allow me to refine an extraordinary item. Your test paper will appear in the knowledge base of the Great Emerald Book." Charlotte was overjoyed to hear this. He was a teacher, and his biggest headache was those stupid students who could never be taught no matter how hard he tried. But when he thought that these students were not his own children, he could always relax a little. But what if he had such a stupid child in the future? This question is the ultimate for all teachers. No teacher can accept it. Charlotte patted her chest lightly and thought to herself, "That's great. In the future, no matter how stupid the child is, I can instill some knowledge into him, and even limit the capacity of his little head, so that no matter how stupid he is, he will have a lower limit in life." This is simply the magical skill that many parents dream of. Charlotte almost forgot for a moment that she still had a lot of questions. He looked at the Muni curator who was excited and holding a test paper, studying difficult mathematical problems, and finally thought of the question that the Serpent of Destiny refused to tell him, and asked, "How did you become like this?" "What is the Eye of Destiny?" Mani held a test paper, smiled, and said, "I knew you would have this question. You have acquired all the knowledge of the Emerald Library, and you should be able to answer this question by yourself. But it takes time to digest knowledge, and you will probably have to think about it for a few years. It is not a big secret, so I will tell you in advance. You should know the 4 levels of the God level." Charlotte nodded to show that she knew. Master Mani said, "The difficulty of the flesh is the easiest to solve. Many people have explored methods that suit them. Of course, there are also fools who simply and crudely make their bodies huge. In fact, except for too many sequelae, the difficulty of the flesh can be overcome. To create a body and a divine body is a very complex and delicate process. The Emerald Library has collected at least 11 methods. You can study them carefully. The difficulty of the soul. It is a bit difficult. But I have figured out that the best way is to use knowledge to fight against the pollution of the evil god. As long as your knowledge is rich enough to form a knowledge fortress, you can resist the endless terrifying divine thoughts. As for consciousness, there is no way to solve it completely. I still don't know how the 9 righteous gods solved this problem and ensured the purity and integrity of my consciousness. But I have come up with a way to deposit my consciousness in the Emerald Secret Scroll and throw away the polluted consciousness, and they will become the Eye of Destiny. Of course, this method has great disadvantages. The biggest disadvantage is that I can't get out. Well, the people who used my method to reach the God level, they can't get out either. Charlotte had sensed that there were many people around him, but these people didn't appear and he couldn't see them. But he could sense that these people were passing their test papers around, because the test papers were the result of his consciousness and could be transmitted and sensed. He also thought of Zimmerman. This peerless genius was indeed something to be proud of. He could think of problems that even Master Mani couldn't figure out. Although Zimmerman might still have some problems in reaching the God level, Charlotte believed that it was only a matter of time and he would be able to solve them. In other words, Charlotte is likely to encounter a God level enemy. It's really a headache. Mani sighed and continued, "As for the powers of the gods, it may be the simplest. As long as you get the powers, you can reach the God level, but it may also be the most difficult. As long as you can't get it, you can't get it. It's like these math problems given to us. If you can't solve them, you can't solve them. You can't solve them anyway." Charlotte thought of her authority as the god of labyrinth, and thought, "That's right. The most amazing thing about mathematics is that if you understand it, you understand it. It is incredibly reliable, and mathematics and truth are eternal. But, can't you cheat with authority? Charlotte suddenly thought of 6 or 7 possibilities. She waved to the handsome administrator and asked, "Are you also a half-baked god?" The handsome guy smiled embarrassedly and said, "Yes, do you have authority?" "No, I have an authority, but it may not be. Anyway, do you want to try?" Chapter 585 My name, Hermes. The handsome administrator was also very curious. If someone else had said this to him, he would definitely not believe it. However, Charlotte could bear all the knowledge in the Emerald Library. He said that it was possible for him to obtain authority, and there was a certain probability. He smiled and said, "I am willing to try." Charlotte scratched her head and said, "I need you to compile a book and give it to me for publication." The handsome administrator said, "What book do you need me to compile?" Charlotte immediately described the tools, rules, dozens of different ways to play, and various customs of playing the snake card. The handsome administrator waved his hand and a book appeared in his hand, recording all these details. After Charlotte explained the snake card, she asked, "I haven't asked for your name yet." The handsome administrator smiled and said, "Hermes." Charlotte was completely stiff. He hesitated for a moment and asked softly, "Did you create classic alchemy?" Hermes nodded slightly and said, "It's just a game, not worth mentioning." Charlotte immediately felt a sense of awe. This is the real show-off. Hermes is a believer in the god of machinery and alchemy. He founded classic alchemy. The Hermes magic system is even more famous. The highest work of this faction is artificial gods. Anti-space technology and long-range sniper rifles are all works of classic alchemy. He did not establish a university, but he was a professor at Hattingen Thunder and Storm University, so all 4 universities have a courses in classic alchemy. In terms of fame, he is even higher than Protagoras, who created Bloody Glory. Charlotte was deeply ashamed of treating this great human philosopher as an ordinary administrator. There is a kind of embarrassment that many years after graduating from university, you meet the old professor who compiled the textbooks back then, and you still pretend to be cool in front of him. He continued with a little embarrassment, "Teacher Hermes, I have also created another game, and I hope it can be named after you, called Hermes Cards. It has a total of 54 cards, and as many as hundreds of ways to play: throwing eggs, poker, filling the big hole, blackjack, double buckle, playing the goddess, bombing the red 10, fighting the landlord, and it can also be used to predict fate and perform magic." Charlotte also introduced dice, card 9, roulette and other instruments. The more Hermes listened, the more surprised he was, and asked, "What kind of authority do you want me to write a book and obtain?" Charlotte answered flatly, "God of gamblers, the god of gambling and games, you will be in charge of worldly happiness and cunning skills. I am also a good novelist. I will reprint my novel and add the fact that you created the complete book of gambling." Hermes' heart was pounding. He was the top master of alchemy and could even create classical alchemy and his own magic system. His rich knowledge and insights were even greater than Juno's. Of course, he could guess that the authority Charlotte mentioned might really be realized in reality. He smiled slightly and said, "I'm afraid that sales of more than 100,000 will have a slight impact on reality." When Charlotte talked about sales, her confidence suddenly increased, and she said, "Please don't worry, I have my own publishing house and bookstore, and I have channels that can sell to all countries in the old world." This time it was Hermes' turn to be stunned. He asked in disbelief, "Can writers now set up their own publishing houses and run bookstores?" Charlotte nodded slightly and said, "I have a small amount of assets, and I also value the cultural industry." Hermes said, "The young are to be feared." Charlotte raised her hand to say goodbye to Master Mani, Hermes, and those ancient alchemists who had been watching but did not show up. He finally realized that those who could enter the Emerald Library were at least at the peak of the saint level before they died. There were no weaklings here. As soon as Charlotte left, someone asked, "Will Charlotte's method succeed?" Soon someone answered, "The probability of success is not low." Soon others joined the discussion. There was no entertainment in the Emerald Library. One could only read books, discuss, and be in a daze. Finally, there was something new, and these ancient alchemists couldn't help but express their opinions. Suddenly, a voice said, "Should we try what he just invented?" Soon, someone used magic to materialize a set of snake cards. Several figures emerged and began to try the most orthodox way. Dozens of people watched for a while, and everyone's hands were itching to materialize snake cards. Soon, the crisp sound of playing snake cards was everywhere in the Emerald Library. Pang, who, gang. Who's firing the cannon? All the same color. Duinman lacks 1 or 9, you're bombing who? I don't know how much time has passed. Hermes looked strange and said, it's only been a dozen days. Mani has been paying attention to him and asked, how do you feel? Hermes closed his eyes and suddenly changed into a black paper suit, which was decorated with snake cards, Hermes cards, dice, roulette, gambling tables and other tools. He also had 2 more dice and a deck of Hermes cards in his hand. He had a more awe-inspiring divine power. Not only Mani, but almost everyone exclaimed, power. The power of the god of gambling and games, many ancient alchemists regretted greatly. Why didn't they fight with Hermes for it at the beginning? If they had taken the initiative at that time, wouldn't they be the ones who have the power of the god of gambling now? At this time, Charlotte had quietly left the Holy Light God country and was arranging the reprinting and sales of the novel in Mecklenburg. He worked hard for more than 10 days, and the new version of the novel had been shipped to major countries in the old continent, but the sales volume had not yet been counted. Charlotte thought to herself, I wonder if this method will work? If Hermes becomes the god of gamblers, he might be able to show up on Hot Spring Mountain and the Holy Light God's kingdom. Hot Spring Mountain is fine, but if he can show up on the Holy Light God's kingdom, maybe he can help me suppress it. Forget about suppressing it, they haven't made any trouble for the time being. Charlotte looked towards the Amazon kingdom and thought, maybe I can give Zimmerman a big surprise. Throughout the old continent, anyone who has bought the new version of the novel will see the new editions when they turn to a certain page. The Serpent of Fate has 2 servant gods, one is the god of gamblers, and the other is the god of joy. The god of gamblers runs around the casinos opened by the Duke of Mecklen all day to maintain these sources of happiness in the world. Together with the god of joy, he is responsible for the happiness of the Lord God every day. Hermes didn't know that Charlotte had added a new identity for him, and he didn't know that this bastard was trying to pull him. Chapter 586, The New Situation on the Continent. After more than 10 days of recuperation, the 3 seriously injured people had almost recovered. Princess May recovered from her injuries and said goodbye to Charlotte. She decided to return to Ingrima and improve her level in seclusion. Charlotte did not try to keep her. Menelman left without saying goodbye. Charlotte did not have time to keep her. Charlotte knew that Princess May was ashamed because she was the first one sent back to Mecklenburg by Zimmerman, but she did not know what Menelman thought. Sometimes, women can be simple and clear at a glance, and sometimes women can be as complicated as the bottom of the sea, deep and unfathomable. He finally took only Cresto back to the Holy Light Kingdom. In the past 10 days, in addition to reprinting novels, Charlotte also digested some knowledge from the Emerald Library. Although these ancient alchemists did not have a formal organization, each of them had extraordinary abilities in a huge network of relationships. They almost collected all the information, books, and secret scrolls that could be found in the old continent. Although the Emerald Library no longer exists in the world, it is still the largest library in the world, with rich and unparalleled content. After digesting this small part of knowledge, Charlotte had an idea to revise Bloody Glory. The vampire secrets collected by Protagoras were far less than what Charlotte knew. Even if Charlotte wanted to, whether she went through Julian or Juno, she could see the complete blood-sucking secret scroll. However, Charlotte wanted to revise Bloody Glory, not to turn it into an all-encompassing and extremely complex secret, because this was unrealistic. No one could spend so much energy and time to practice countless secrets, not to mention that some secrets had similar functions. After practicing one of them, there was no need to practice another similar supernatural power. It was not to cultivate peerless strongmen, because peerless strongmen could not be cultivated, and he did not plan to practice by himself. His cultivation path had been determined, and he only needed to follow the steps. He wanted to cultivate cannon fodder-type warriors, a quick version of the vampires. The purpose of Charlotte's revision of Bloody Glory. Well, he was already a duke, and the mansion also needed a group of eunuchs. Homex 2, the new version of Bloody Glory will cultivate gender. It's quite exciting to think that from him on, every Duke of Mecklen will be surrounded by a group of vampire eunuchs when he travels. Charlotte followed Protagoras' idea and still retained the 13 skills, but replaced several superpowers. Moreover, each of them only retains one basic superpower, and will not derive new superpowers, but will only be infinitely superimposed. He fought with Wood Brandon and understood that even the most basic superpowers will be extremely powerful once they are superimposed. He now doesn't know how to crack Wood Brandon's spirit hound. Although Charlotte had superimposed agility before, it was only recently that he realized the infinite benefits of superimposing basic superpowers. The 13 skills of the new version of Bloody Glory can be matched with each other to burst out the strongest combat power, and the time consumed in cultivation is also the shortest. It can maximize the potential of practitioners in the shortest time. Charlotte has been keeping her troops in place for more than 10 days. And the army of the Amazon Kingdom has already conquered 3 countries and completed the occupation. The army of Mecklenburg encountered stubborn resistance. Byron sent the second strongest man, Count Constantine, to stop Mecklenburg's New World immigrants in a small town of Byron, the city of Shell. Under the protection of the loyal knights, the royal family of Parmas crossed the Gunz Mountains and fled to Moldova, and asked for political asylum from Roverito and Arsène Lupin Robin, who were stationed in Moldova. Arsène Lupin had accepted the royal family of Parmas and was actively preparing for war. Of course, he was not helping Parmas to fight, but he had been in Moldova for many years and had a deep affection for this small country. He had to protect a group of small Mechlin, so he could not escape and could only fight bravely. Arsène Lupin also sent out a call for help to Mecklenburg and Strasbourg. He believed that both Anne and Charlotte would send people to support him. As long as he could survive one round and wait for the reinforcements to arrive, Moldova would be safe. Anne, as the Grand Duke of Moldova, certainly would not stand by and watch someone die, but the power in her hands could barely maintain the balance of Strasbourg, and she had no power to withdraw power to rescue Moldova. Moreover, Fars and Moldova were 2 countries, and even if she wanted to transfer Fars's army to Moldova, it would not be in accordance with the rules. So Anne wrote a letter to Charlotte, asking him for help. Charlotte brought Cresto back to the Holy Light Kingdom, and received requests for help from Moldova and Anne one after another. She immediately asked Romeos to take 2 saints to rescue Moldova. Romeos did not hesitate and immediately took 2 speakers of the New World Congress. After Romeos left, the group of saints of the New World Congress quickly integrated into Charlotte Mecklen's team. First of all, the New World Congress was just a loose alliance, and the speakers were only strong, not the lords of the New World people. Secondly, Charlotte was indeed the Lord of South Seraph in name, and the New World Congress had sworn allegiance to him. The third was, it was really fun on the Holy Light God. Especially after the publication of Hermes's complete book of gambling, the Holy Light God was close to the water and added a batch of entertainment projects earlier. Not to mention the immigrants from the New World, even the nobles of the Old World had never seen so much enjoyment. Every day, you can drink fine wine, soak in hot springs, blow the sea breeze, grill fresh meat, countless delicacies, play card games one after another, have all kinds of entertainment that have never been seen before, and have beautiful big limo that can't be seen in either the Old World or the New World. Even a new batch of beautiful upgraded big limo will appear every day. When Romeus was on the Holy Light God, as the chief speaker, he could still have some deterrence, but when he took the 2 speakers away, these saints from the New World were subtly influenced and no longer regarded themselves as outsiders. Although Charlotte played a little trick, he was just going with the flow. If his Duke of Mechlin was not rich enough and the political atmosphere made people feel a sense of belonging, even if he used more conspiracies and tricks, he would never have achieved the current result. He handled the integration of forces, which was just a small matter that he was familiar with. For Charlotte, how to deal with the rebellious forces of the 3 immigrants was the top priority. After dealing with Zimmerman in the Amazon Kingdom, he also roughly understood that these 3 immigrant forces were not a group. Zimmerman was just one of the forces. He also wanted to know who is controlling the other 2 forces. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 587 The Storm Center of the Old Continent. The immigrants from the New World have started 2 wars in a row. One was the attack on the Duchy of Mecklenburg. Almost all the countries in the Old World have paid attention to this war. They were all surprised at the power that Anne could mobilize, but they were even more surprised at the strength of the New World Immigrant Alliance. At the most critical moment, Charlotte returned to Mecklenburg and not only repelled the coalition forces of the New World immigrants, but also swallowed up a part of the New World immigrant forces, which directly shocked everyone. Another one is the current war. The army of Gotlandsberg can actually fight with the army of Byron. Even Constantine failed to repel this New World immigrant army, which really shocked the entire Old World. Even the four empires quietly gave up the dispute and started peace talks, wanting to resolve the division of the last legacy of the Black Phoenix dynasty as soon as possible and withdraw their strength to deal with the immigration offensive of the New World. The immigrant army that captured the Amazon kingdom was unstoppable and broke through 3 countries in succession. They were forming a siege with the New World immigrant army of Gotlandsberg. As long as they crossed the Ganges Mountains and captured Moldova, they could enter Baron. No one expected that they did cross the Ganges Mountains, but were blocked by Moldova, a small country. As soon as the Amazon kingdom's army entered Moldova, Baron announced that it had given up several disputed territories, quickly signed treaties with the 3 empires, and began to frequently mobilize troops to prepare to hit the immigrant army of the New World head-on. The vampires did not want to be the second empire to be destroyed in the Old World. Moldova became the center of the storm for the entire continent in a very short time. Because everyone knew that once Moldova fell, Baron would be caught in a 2-front war, and no one knew how powerful these New World people were. After Baron gave up the argument and quickly signed the contract, the 3 empires also reached a settlement. Ingrimmar was worried that the New World would attack its homeland. After all, Ingrimmar was an island country. Once attacked, it would be isolated and helpless. The Lionheart dynasty did not want to start a war. They were also the only country that did not fight a large-scale war in this war. Fars, Black Phoenix, and Byron were the most violent places in this war. Infeland and Fars lost countless troops and more than 20 saints died, and the national strength declined significantly. Moreover, Fars had experienced 3 rebellions in a row. The Duchess of Misu, the largest force in the navy, turned to Byron. The entire empire was in tatters and it was impossible to continue the war. After the old Emperor of Brittany returned to Strasbourg from the front line, after looking at the empire's finances, it was said that he suffered from insomnia that night and stayed in the great temple of the Serpent of Fate, where his deceased wife was buried for a whole night. Charlotte has been sitting still in the waters near the Amazon kingdom. He doesn't know how to deal with Zimmerman, and even doesn't know who to ask for help. After fighting with Zimmerman, Charlotte believes that without more than 5 peak saints, he will never be able to kill this guy, but where can he find more than 5 peak saints? Can the old emperor and his brother-in-law still do it? I have never heard of asking an emperor and a crown prince to take such a risk. Charlotte was in her cabin, reading the intelligence she received today, and she felt a little depressed. Recently, the major empires and ordinary countries in the Old World have been extremely active. Originally, the immigrants from the New World attacked the Dukedom of Mechlin, and all countries stayed out of it. Although they were also very worried, it was not their own country that was attacked. But this time it was different. 6 countries have been destroyed one after another, and even Baron was attacked. No country has a sense of security. After all, no one knows whether there will be immigrant troops in the New World. No one knows where the ultimate attack of these 3 immigrant fleets is. Is it enough to occupy a few countries? Or will they continue to attack, spreading the flames of war to the entire Old World? Because Charlotte had a record of resisting the New World immigrant army with the power of the Duchy of Mecklenburg, more than a dozen countries have sent requests for alliance, hoping to establish mutual assistance and send troops to each other when attacked. Charlotte scoffed at this invitation to form an alliance. When his Duchy of Mecklenburg was attacked by the New World Congress, no one helped except his allies. Now they want to take advantage of the Duchy of Mecklenburg's army for free, but they are unwilling to pay the price. The only fate they have is Parmas. Charlotte actually had a lot of complaints about the royal family of Parmas going to Moldova to eat and drink for free, and had asked Arsène Lupin to send them to Bayern. But because the battle was intense, Arsène Lupin had not had time to do it. Someone knocked on the door outside the room, and Charlotte said, "You can come in." Sophia Galinold pushed the door open and walked in. Although she was a girl who risked her life for love, she was also a girl who was willing to go to the battlefield for her country. Now that there was a war in the old continent again, Sophia Galinold quickly entered the role of chief of staff. She had been a commander and commanded a fleet. Her university grades were also top-notch, and her knowledge was second to none among her peers. Even Menelman was inferior to her, and she had replaced the role of Black Dragon. Well, Black Dragon's ecological niche was not solid to begin with. Sophia Gallinold brought Charlotte lunch and said softly, "This war is no longer the business of our dukedom of Mechlin. It is a war of all countries in the entire old continent. You don't have to bear all the responsibilities." Charlotte nodded, but she didn't say a word. No one in the old continent had ever snatched Zimmerman's fiancée. Although he didn't mean to snatch her. Well, Zimmerman would probably not give him a chance to quibble. Charlotte had a good appetite. As a time traveler, he could always remain calm no matter how critical the situation was. While eating, he said to Sophia Gallinold, "To reach the divine level, you need to overcome 4 major difficulties. I don't know what Zimmerman's true form is, but his body is being nurtured in the body of that girl Zimmerman. He may have completed the reshaping of his soul and solved the problem of consciousness. He even claims to have the authority of war and chaos. Then the only thing that might go wrong is his true form. If I can take a picture of his true form and destroy it, maybe there is a chance to turn the tables." Sophia Gallinold has not yet stepped into the holy level, but she has been with Charlotte recently and has heard this knowledge that is considered a top secret in the entire old world. Miss Gallinold raised her eyebrows slightly and said, "His true form is most likely in the New World. What should we do?" Charlotte fell into deep thought. Chapter 588 Matter and Concepts. Charlotte pieced together the truth of entering the god level in Juno, the Holy Light Kingdom, Emilia, Zimmerman, and the Emerald Library. He also thought about how to make his body contain more power if he entered the god level. Charlotte easily came to the conclusion, to combine with some kind of eternal and indestructible substance. The second is to combine with some kind of eternal and indestructible concept. Eternal and indestructible things are easy to be preempted by others. Concepts are too easy to be tampered with. The 9 righteous gods ascended to the god level, and it can be seen from their titles that they must be a combination of matter and concepts to achieve eternal immortality. The body of the Black Moon Lady must be the Black Moon. The body of the old man holding the lantern is 100% a magic level lamp. The dragon of eternity and illusion must be a dragon. Not to mention the little snake. Charlotte judged others by himself and had several guesses about Zimmerman's body, but he was not yet able to verify it. First of all, the first thing to do is to rule out war. No war can be fought endlessly. Secondly, chaos must be ruled out. Chaos only has concepts, but no matter, and it cannot carry power alone. There are gods of war in almost all myths on Earth, but these gods of war are either losers or clowns, and rarely have positive images. The power of war is very powerful, but it must have a fatal weakness. It cannot combine matter and concepts like the 9 gods. Charlotte thought for a long time and said to Sophia Gallinold, "There are also the 9 gods on our side. I believe that as long as we wait patiently, there will be new changes." Seeing that Charlotte was so patient, Sophia Gallinold felt a little relieved. After Charlotte had lunch, she called a big limo in, took out the tableware, and stayed to accompany Charlotte. Charlotte was used to it. Since Mendelman and Princess May left, he could see Sophia Gallinold at least 15 hours a day. To be honest, Charlotte was very happy to see such a natural little beauty deliberately trying to please herself. The Great Limo is a beauty that people in this world have never seen, but for Charlotte, they are far inferior to natural beauties like Sophia Gallinold, and they are more in line with his aesthetics. He will never touch any Great Limo. Well, Charlotte is also worried about this thing, and said something dirty. Sophia Gallinold has a good impression of Charlotte because when she was most panicked, Charlotte appeared like a hero in the legend, which really hit the girl's heart. But she got along with Charlotte and discovered Charlotte's talent. In the entire old world, there are probably few people who can be comparable to Charlotte in literature. Well, the literature of the old world is really backward. When she knew that Charlotte and Anne were together, she also thought about retreating, but in the end, Strasbourg Rose chose to fight. When the two were together, Charlotte wisely avoided many topics, and Sophia Gallinold also tacitly avoided these topics. The safe topic they can talk about now is the situation in the old world. Sophia Gallinold was certain that Ingrimmar, Fars and the Lionheart dynasty would definitely join the war. Although Charlotte didn't quite believe it, she didn't refute it. She just discussed with Sophia under what circumstances the other 3 empires would join. Charlotte said, "Although Byrne lost considerable strength in the war with Fars, the vampires are very powerful and there are still many dormant antiques. Moreover, they are in alliance with a Black Phoenix and must have colluded with the Black Phoenix nobles. They have surrendered a group of Black Phoenix talents including Count Constantine, and their strength is more complete than Far's. Add to that the surrender of Archduchess Misu. I think Byron can hold on for a long time, and there is even a chance that it can defeat the immigrants from the New World. Let's take a step back. Even if Byron is defeated, there are still more cards. If we fight Byron, those blood ancestors may not care, and even the righteous gods will suppress the blood ancestors. But if Byron is destroyed by the people of the New World, how could those old things not come out? Even the righteous gods will support them. It's impossible that those blood ancestors also surrendered to the evil gods of the New World. Sophia Gallinold said, it's really possible. Well, I believe you have heard a lot of rumors. Some of the blood ancestors were not satisfied with being suppressed by the righteous gods in the old world, so they crossed the ocean and went to the New World. Maybe the evil gods in the New World are mixed with the blood ancestors. Now they are attacking Baron, but who can guarantee that Baron will not join these people from the New World? Charlotte agreed with Sophia Gallinold's opinion, but he still felt that there should be some evidence to draw further conclusions. Charlotte had suspected that the labyrinth evil god Agnerus was a member of the Vango clan, but he was unable to confirm this until the evil god died. The three evil gods, the storm evil god Ipjal, the ocean current and tide evil gods Eloxen, and the golden sea evil god Nero, tore the body of Agnerus, and he and Juno, the holy light god Guaheo, and Emilia divided the body of this evil god. But Charlotte did not find that Agnerus had the characteristics of a member of the Vango clan, nor did he show that he was proficient in the infinite mirror world. This evil god has fallen. If he really has this ability, he will definitely not hide it anymore. So Charlotte is 80% to 90% sure that Agnerus is really just the labyrinth evil god, and is not proficient in the infinite mirror world. It is highly likely that he is not the blood ancestor of the Vango clan, or other members of the Vango clan. Since Agnerus is not the blood ancestor, it is questionable whether the evil gods of the New World have blood ancestors. The two chatted for an afternoon, and Charlotte suggested eating at a coffee shop on the ship, and Sophia Gallinold readily agreed. Thanks to Charlotte's efforts, the Holy Light Kingdom is more luxurious than any luxury cruise ship on Earth, with more entertainment programs, and even a food street, where ingredients are transported from all over the old continent through the spiritual channel. This coffee shop was opened by an immigrant from the New World. He didn't like fighting. After the Dukedom of Mecklen and the Free Territory of the New World Congress signed a leap, he went to Hot Spring Mountain and opened a coffee shop. Andreas went to his shop by chance. After tasting his craftsmanship, he was very impressed and took him to the Holy Light Kingdom. After all, he couldn't go to Hot Spring Mountain often, but he would stay on the Holy Light Kingdom for a long time. When Charlotte and Sophia Gallinold came over, the Golden Goat Herolf happened to be there. He was hugging two big demons and drinking coffee, looking very unhappy. Chapter 589, Illegitimate Child. What a troublesome problem. Charlotte ordered some food casually and asked, Ruff, why are you a little unhappy? The old goat was silent for a long time before answering. Do you think I, a person who was deceived into signing a magic contract document, should be happy? Charlotte rubbed her brows and had to admit that the unhappiness of the Golden Goat Rolf was simply justified. He smiled slightly and said, Ruff, you know, I hate a lot of things, such as human trafficking. Because of the magic contract document, I often forget the bad things you have done before. If you think it will be unpleasant to have a magic contract document, I can also untie it and then kill you. Charlotte stared at the Golden Goat Rolf and said word by word, you know, it may not be a big deal for me to kill you now. Although Charlotte was only at the 21st level, the Golden Goat Rolf shuddered and immediately became happy, saying, no, I think it's good to have a contract. You know, in the entire Knights of Favonius, only 3 people have this honor? Charlotte smiled slightly and asked again, Ruff, why are you a little unhappy? This old goat has been contracted for a long time, and it is definitely not because of this that he is unhappy. Golden Goat Rolf sighed and said, Ogon has been promoted. This time, even Charlotte was slightly surprised and asked, why don't I know? Golden Goat Rolf said lightly, because he didn't tell anyone. Charlotte suddenly realized and asked, not recently. The old goat nodded. Charlotte could understand the feelings of Golden Goat Rolf. Among Charlotte's subordinates, the most were the strong and holy level of the 22nd level, and there were fewer low-level and top-level ones. However, everyone was originally equal in strength, but suddenly one person was secretly promoted, which would make people depressed. At this moment, the set meals ordered by Charlotte and Sophia Gallinold were delivered, and even chopsticks were provided for both of them. Charlotte promoted this thing for a while, But it didn't work well, so she gave up. Anyway, he was not unable to use a knife and fork. However, this thing has become a small trend, especially popular in Hot Spring Mountain and the Holy Light Kingdom. Many restaurants in these two places provide customers with a pair of chopsticks as an alternative in addition to knives and forks. Charlotte took the chopsticks and skillfully picked up a piece of cut beef. She said, "You are old and your potential is exhausted. It is normal for you to not be promoted. Don't be depressed about it. Think about happy things, such as a few more illegitimate children." The old face of the golden goat Herolf blushed and whispered, "How do you know?" Charlotte really didn't care about the marriage status of his subordinates. The old goat was not young, and he would have many women. He would definitely have offspring. But after he received the golden goat Herolf, he had never seen his family, and gradually thought that the old goat was an old bachelor. Well, poor, unmarried, single men. It's normal. When passing by, I just want to walk around. Although the old goat is poor because of him. Charlotte pretended to have everything under control and smiled. "It's just a small matter." The golden goat Rolf took a deep breath and said, "I used to think that these cubs would fend for themselves and have nothing to do with me. But recently I suddenly felt that it would be interesting to raise them. I currently know of more than a dozen children, most of whom are orc-human hybrids, and there are two." He patted the two big lingmo in his arms and said, "They gave birth to them." Charlotte was shocked and thought to herself, "Old goat, you have really made a contribution to the great integration of the nation." He shrugged and didn't want to discuss this matter anymore. His biggest headache now is the illegitimate child. Charlotte doesn't want to have an illegitimate child. After all, he promised Antonio at the beginning, and he also feels that he should be loyal to Anne. But apart from Menelman, Princess Maid Guillaume, and Sophia Galanid, he also has several mothers outside of humanity and family members of evil gods. When he thinks of Gareth, forget it. This big boy is quite normal except that he is a little older. He was troubled by Amon and Emilia, and didn't know how to deal with them. Charlotte believed that even if all the illegitimate children of the golden goat Herolf were added together, they might not be as evil as one of Amon's eyes. As for Emilia, Charlotte even felt that if Emilia went berserk, she might not have the power to suppress her illegitimate children. What a headache. Before Charlotte and Sophia's dishes were served, Agon and Chiudelu entered the cafe together. When they saw Charlotte and the golden goat Herolf, they were both slightly stunned and greeted them separately. As soon as Agon sat down, Charlotte couldn't help asking, "Have you been promoted to the 23rd level?" Agon curled his long nose and said shyly, "I was promoted a month ago." Charlotte nodded and said, "I've always heard that the dragon hammer is in your hand. Is it true?" Seeing Agon's slight hesitation, he added, "If you have it, use it quickly. I'm afraid that if you don't use it, the dragon hammer will be out of date. I recently got the Emerald Secret Scroll. Maybe, in a short time, everyone will be able to have a saint-level extraordinary artifact." Charlotte did not hide the fact that he got the Emerald Secret Scroll, but he did not mention the Emerald Library and the bunch of half-step god-level alchemists in it. However, even so, it was enough to cause a lot of speculation. At this time, Charlotte publicly said that the dragon hammer might be out of date, and maybe everyone would have a saint-level extraordinary artifact in the future, which still shocked everyone. Not just Agon. Agon originally thought that the dragon hammer was a sacred object of the orcs, and that he should keep it safe, so he had never used it in public in previous battles. Charlotte had never asked him if he had the dragon hammer, and Agon had always been secretly grateful. He actually had the idea of how to refuse Charlotte's request for the dragon hammer, and even had a plan that if he could not refuse, he would rather leave the Knights of Favonius and find another way out for the Elephant Man. Agon never expected that when Charlotte asked about the dragon hammer for the first time, she was not asking for this sacred object of the orcs, but telling him to use it quickly if he could. If he didn't use it again, he would have to go through aversion. Agon suddenly remembered that he had known Charlotte for the first time, but because of his caution, he was embarrassed. When he was promoted to the 23rd level, he had also thought about whether he would become the strongest combat force under Charlotte. But with the addition of a group of strong men from the New World Conference, his 23rd level was not so sweet. If even the dragon hammer had to go through aversion, Agon suddenly felt tragic. Chapter 590. Okay, I promise not to eat them. After dinner, Charlotte sent Sophia Galanold back to the cabin, and then boarded the highest deck to look at the Holy Light Kingdom. This legendary warship was more lively at night than during the day. The magic lights that Charlotte could not afford with her salary for several years were everywhere on the Holy Light Kingdom, illuminating the legendary warship like daylight. Originally, there were only big magicians on the Holy Light Kingdom. Charlotte would only call his generals when he went out to fight, and would only bring a very small number of logistics personnel. However, this time he stayed in the outer sea of the Amazon Kingdom for a long time, and his generals secretly brought many people up, and even held several magic item auctions here, with wealthy merchants from other countries coming to support him. Charlotte gave up taxes, but the wealth he gained from business was far more than the taxes of this era. Charlotte was never stingy with his generals. His subordinates were all rich, and the officer corps of the Knights of Favonius topped the entire old continent in terms of wealth index. This is also the fundamental reason why the cohesion of the Knights of Favonius has always been very high, and even at Anne's command, a large number of knights will abandon their territory and retreat to Mecklenburg. Charlotte is only happy to see this situation happen. As a traverser, he deeply knows how important it is to let his own people live well. Not far from the Holy Light Kingdom is the Emilia. Compared with the bright lights and bustle here, the Emilia is quiet and dark, and looks a bit lonely. Charlotte tapped his feet, took off into the air, and flew lightly. He has been promoted to the saint rank for a long time, but he is still very fascinated by this unrestrained feeling. He crossed the sea and landed on the Emilia. Before he stood firm, he heard a surprised and happy voice, and a small body fell into his arms. "Dad, Emilia is so sad to be alone." Charlotte stroked the little girl's hair and asked, "Where's Gareth?" Gareth landed beside her and whispered, "Emilia said I'm not very fun." Charlotte agreed with this and thought Gareth was not very fun. Gareth was not a toy. Charlotte glanced at the Holy Light Kingdom, thought for a while, and said, "The Great Limo is not suitable here. I will help you gather a group of ghost crew members. More people will make it more lively." Emilia swallowed her saliva and said, "Okay, I promise not to eat them." Charlotte reached out and touched her forehead. At the beginning, there were still some ghost crew members on the Emilia. The ghost ship swallowed by this legendary warship, the ghost crew members on it naturally joined the Emilia, but now they are gone. Obviously they were eaten. He did not comment on this matter, but hesitated for a while. The lives of the ghost crew members are also lives. Although they are not living creatures, they can't be sent out to be eaten like this. Emilia said she would not eat them, but Charlotte did not quite believe it. After thinking for a while, he suddenly thought of an idea and said, "The Amazon Kingdom is full of plant-like residents. I'll get you a batch. How about you raise them for fun? Their lives are a bit strange. Can you keep them alive?" Emilia said eagerly, "Dad, I can try. I promise to try my best to keep them alive." Charlotte nodded and said, "Let's go to the shore first." Emilia cheered, and without any command, the legendary warship sailed to the coast of the Amazon Kingdom. Charlotte said hello to Gareth, and the two of them flew into the air and landed on the shore. Charlotte looked at the dense forests everywhere, and suddenly her heart moved. She had a sudden idea, and she used her hands to hold a big tree, pulled it out alive, and threw it to the Emilia. The plants in the Amazon Kingdom were extremely strange. Charlotte had only come up with this idea by chance and had never thought of any use. But when he heard Emilia's timid voice on the boat, "Dad, they were so delicious that I couldn't help it. Should I not eat them?" Charlotte suddenly had an idea and shouted, "Emilia, eat as much as you want. Dad will get you more." He originally wanted to catch some residents of the Amazon Kingdom to make Emilia happy, but at this time he suddenly discovered a new world. He had never thought about how to deal with the countless plants in the Amazon Kingdom, but at this time he suddenly had a crazy idea. Charlotte said hello to Gareth, and the two of them picked the thickest trees, pulled them up one by one, and threw them on the Emilia. Emilia seemed very happy. These trees fell on the Emilia and disappeared without a trace, and were digested by this legendary battleship. Charlotte and Gareth were both saints, and the strongest among them. It was a waste of their talents to pull out trees. Soon, they cleared a bare area on the coast. Charlotte could even sense that a mysterious force was eroding the Amazon Kingdom. The source of this force was a bit complicated. Some came from the Emilia, and some came from the Holy Light Kingdom. Charlotte glanced at the Holy Light Kingdom, which was motionless on the sea. She knew that this legendary warship had probably long coveted the plants that were spawned by the evil god's power. He just didn't expect that the Amazon Kingdom was full of evil plants, and it could actually become a flaw. Charlotte stretched out his hand and pressed it on the ground, and made a simple maze of the cleared ground. With amaze, those plants could no longer erode. He planned to call everyone tomorrow to cut trees and pull out weeds together. Charlotte returned to the Amelia and saw Amelia smiling with eyes as curved as crescent moons. She kept taking out something from her body and stuffing it into her mouth. She looked very cute while eating. She couldn't help but say, "Can you digest this power?" Amelia nodded her head desperately and said, "It's a bit like Dapiculato. It has a crispy texture and a little sticky. It's just that the nutrition is average. It contains too little power." Charlotte couldn't help but smile. These plants were born out of the power of the evil god. How could the power they contained compare to the authentic big guys like the Ishmaran Palace and the Agmaris Labyrinth? Charlotte said calmly, "Although the nutrition is average, there is enough of it. The whole country is full of these plants that contain the power of evil gods. As long as you can eat it, you can eat as much as you want." The people on the Holy Light God's kingdom did not expect that this night would be their last carnival. From tomorrow morning on, they would temporarily change their jobs to farmers, woodcutters, and grass diggers, and this hard work would last for a long time. Chapter 591 Wake up and conquer the world with your king. Charlotte had a sudden inspiration, but he didn't expect that this inspiration would work so well. He quickly gained a foothold on the coastline of the Amazon kingdom. However, the Amelia could not land, which led to, when the plants on the seashore were cleaned up, the Holy Light Kingdom became the main force to digest these evil plants. Charlotte turned the Holy Light Kingdom into a golden ring, brought it to land, and then released it. He and the other saints didn't have to do anything. The Holy Light Kingdom could automatically clean up the nearby several square kilometers of land. After Charlotte turned the cleaned land into a maze, he repeated the previous procedure, and the Holy Light Kingdom could quickly clean up another piece of land of several square kilometers. Although this method was a little stupid, it was really effective, but the saints who followed Charlotte soon began to complain. After recovering a port, Charlotte quickly stopped the matter. After all, the saints are saints. It is impossible to use them as coolies. Moreover, he already had a better way. After all, felling trees didn't require such strong workers as the saints. Charlotte announced that he would stop felling trees. His saints cheered and held a dinner party that day. Everyone reveled all night. The next day, when everyone got up, they saw a huge fleet on the sea, with sails like clouds. Charlotte transferred 10,000 knights of Favonius and 30,000 auxiliary personnel from Mecklenburg. What Charlotte was looking forward to was that a batch of newly built land battleships and centurions came with the fleet. Charlotte had already found Sean Connor and offered him generous conditions, allowing him to bring a group of people to Mecklenburg to open a new alchemy workshop. After obtaining the Emerald Secret Scroll, he also sent the design drawings of the land battleship and the centurion to the Emerald Library. The ancient alchemists here quickly sorted out the design ideas of the two drawings and took out a new design. With the full support of Mecklenburg, Sean Connor's Blue Magpie workshop quickly built a prototype. After several tests and improvements, it was finalized for mass production. The hundreds of écus Charlotte invested at the beginning were only enough to improve the blueprints. From improving the blueprints, relocating the Blue Magpie workshop, to investing resources, to building mass-produced land battleships and centurions, Charlotte spent tens of thousands of écus, and this was the initial investment. Later, the investment would be even higher for improving the model and mass manufacturing. However, war is a game of money. Charlotte believes that as long as the land battleships and centurions show their power on the battlefield, they can get a large number of orders from various countries, thus forming a virtuous circle for Mecklenburg's alchemy industry. When the land battleships and centurions from the fleet drove into and jumped into the sea, and after a while, they emerged from the sea and silently surged onto the land, the shocking feeling was simply incomparable. The magic circle on the land battleship glowed with bloody light, and these alchemical creations revealed a fierce momentum that had never been seen on this land. One after another, the centurions followed closely behind. Although Charlotte did not understand military affairs, he was at least not so stupid that he did not even know about the coordination of infantry and tanks. Although the land battleships were fierce, they could be invincible with the cooperation of the centurions. The centurions could also greatly increase their survivability on the battlefield by relying on the land battleships. Although the shape of these centurions was similar to William Tritton's design, their internal structure was very different. Their stomachs were empty, and the riders could sit or stand in them. There were pedals under their feet, and they could control the centurions to move forward, backward, turn, and run just by relying on their feet. The riders who controlled the centurions would have a knight's lance, an alchemical rifle, and carry 500 rounds of bullets. Some riders would also prepare their own weapons such as swords, pistols, grappling hooks, bows and arrows, and throwing knives. There were only 12 land battleships produced in the first batch, and only more than 100 centurions were made. Charlotte brought them all. So far, in order to operate a land battleship or drive a centurion, the minimum requirement is to be a first-level extraordinary person. Thanks to Charlotte's promotion of the Beast Scout transformation technique, his Knights of Favonius have more low-level extraordinary people than other noble knights, and there is no shortage of people who can drive land battleships and centurions. When this mini steel torrent appeared on land, even the saints under Charlotte changed color slightly. They all knew that these two alchemical weapons, although limited in firepower, neither land battleships nor centurions could pose a threat to the saints, but it would be difficult for the saints to bite the land battleships. After all, the defense of the magic circle is a headache even for the saints. The centurions protected by land battleships are already a force that cannot be ignored on the battlefield. They almost have the lethality comparable to that of the saints, but the number of saints is rare, while land battleships and centurions can be mass-produced, and the two are simply incomparable. With more than 10,000 warriors of the Knights of Favonius, Charlotte has the main force of cutting trees, and whether it is land battleships or centurions, the mobility of these two alchemical artifacts is very strong. Well, at least the transportation capacity is not inferior to that of hand tractors. Their efficiency in cutting trees is even stronger than that of the saints. After all, the saints have never done hard labor and will be lazy from time to time, but this group of ordinary soldiers has strict military discipline and follows orders. They are much more obedient than the saints and are more willing to work. In the center of Manai City, the palace where the previous royal family lived suddenly shook slightly. Zimmerman woke up, her pretty face was full of pain, and soon exploded. Another Zimmerman walked out of the void. He looked refreshed and his strength had improved significantly compared to the last time he fought with Charlotte and others. Zimmerman glanced into the distance in the direction of the sea and could not help but say, "This Mr. Charlotte Mecklen really knows how to make things difficult for me. How did he come up with the idea of cutting down trees? Although Amazon is a small kingdom, at his speed, it will take decades to cut down trees. It won't take decades, at most one day. I will be able to flatten the old continent and truly ascend to the level of a god. Don't worry about him for now." Zimmerman shook his arms and shouted loudly, "My tree gods! Wake up and conquer the world with your king." Countless sleeping tree gods trembled slightly, and slowly pulled out their roots bare deep underground. These half-human, half-plant evil spirits slowly floated up to the sky. There were also residents who had been transformed by evil spirits in various parts of Manai City, and they kept gathering towards the palace. A powerful army took shape. Chapter 592, The Knights of the Lost Nation. When Charlotte encountered Zimmerman, he would of course inform the old Emperor of Brittany and his elder brother-in-law Antonio, but the old Emperor suppressed the matter for some reason. So when Zimmerman appeared again, he shocked the entire old continent. Zimmerman did not live up to the shock of the entire continent. He swept through 6 countries within a month, reducing the number of countries in the old continent to 23. The Kingdom of Amazon became a huge country with all the territories of 10 small countries, and its area even directly ranked first in the old continent. Faced with such an imminent crisis, the 4 empires signed a contract in the shortest time and formed an alliance. Almost all other countries in the old continent joined this alliance without hesitation, except for a country called Saint Lumiere. This country believed in the Lord of Light, refused all alliances, and refused all wars. At the beginning of its establishment, it declared permanent neutrality. Even in the face of such a crisis, it did not modify its national policy. As the front line of resistance, the city of Cher and Moldova gathered the coalition forces of various countries in a very short time. I won't talk about the city of Cher. After all, with Count Constance in charge, it was enough to overwhelm the commanders of various countries, but Moldova was much worse. Arsène Lupin's prestige was not enough, and Romeo's and Machel were both immigrants from the New World. Although they had enough military strength, they were naturally not trusted by the generals of various countries. Many conflicts broke out in just a few days. Charlotte had to give up cutting trees and led all her men to Moldova. Moldova was separated from Fars by a small country, bordering Braun. Before and became the Grand Duchess of Moldova, she was very resistant to Braun, always worried that Braun would annex it. The relationship between the two countries was not friendly, which was why Charlotte occupied Moldova. Braun readily recognized Anne's status as the Grand Duchess. Moldova is relatively closed in terrain. It is a purely landlocked country with no ports. Before Anne became the Grand Duchess of Moldova, the domestic economy was also very bad. It couldn't even support bandits like Arsène Lupin, and had to rely on Princess Axel for assistance. But after Anne became the Grand Duchess of Moldova, the relationship between Moldova and Byron quickly warmed up. Because several cities were turned into mazes, the caravans of the Duke of Mecklenburg would enter Byron through Moldova, making Moldova more than 10 times more prosperous than before. After Anne ascended the throne, the capital of Moldova was renamed Brittany Castle. The city has undergone a long period of reconstruction and has expanded more than 3 times in size. The original expanded city seemed a bit deserted, and the caravans coming and going were not enough to fill the expanded city. But since the war, the refugees who fled here have made it a chaotic prosperity. When Charlotte brought the Knights of Favonius to Brittany Castle, the people of Moldova cheered. Their love for Charlotte even exceeded that of their lord, Grand Duchess Anne of Brittany. There is no way. Charlotte did bring a new atmosphere to the country. Now no one misses the royal family of Moldova. Moldova is even the best-selling region for Anne Mecklen's novels. 5 or 6 out of 10 households can find novels by this best-selling author. Moldova is Anne's fiefdom. Charlotte must not allow Moldova to be conquered by Zimmerman. After entering Moldova, the first thing he did was to deal with the refugees from various countries who fled. The Amazon kingdom conquered 9 small countries, but Zimmerman's power had its limits. The evil plants could not cover all the countries at all, causing the people of these small countries to flee in panic. The 4 empires became the first target of refugees from various countries. A large number of people poured in a short period of time, making the 4 empires miserable, and they could only try their best to maintain. Because of Moldova's strength, it also became a place where refugees poured in. Charlotte was different from other countries. He did not leave the refugees alone. He screened these refugees several times. All the extraordinary people were absorbed into the Knights of Favonius. Those who had property had their property confiscated and assigned to work in major chambers of commerce. Those who had no property but had a skill were also arranged to work in the Duchy of Mecklenburg. For those who had nothing left, not even a skill, Charlotte established another knight group, the Knights of the Lost Nation. All these people were thrown into it. Charlotte formed the Knights of the Lost Nation, naturally not expecting these people to go to war, and he had no habit of filling cannon fodder on the front line. The main work of the Knights of the Lost Nation was to reclaim the deserted islands in the Argel Sea Islands. Charlotte did this out of helplessness. He needed to squeeze out all the war potential in the territory to cope with this war. Although the Duchy of Mecklenburg had resources and food, he could not use the food that the people of the Duchy of Mecklenburg had worked hard to grow and give it to refugees from various countries who fled to Moldova for nothing. He also couldn't let these refugees from various countries disrupt the order of Moldova, let alone let them starve to the point of wanting to rebel. In view of the fact that there were not so many jobs in the medieval era of the Old World, only reclamation could absorb a large number of laborers. If this group of people could really reclaim the islands in the Argus Sea, at least the Duke of Moldova would not lack food during the long war and could also replenish some supplies. The Knights of the Lost Country had no salary and had heavy work every day, but they could basically guarantee enough food. Well, for those who were unwilling to accept discipline, Charlotte would confiscate all their property and drive them to Bayern. Anyway, Moldova was the closest to Bayern. However, what Charlotte could not have imagined was that Bayern discovered that Moldova could handle the refugees well, and let the army drive the refugees away and force them to flee to Moldova, which led to the increasing number of refugees in Moldova. Well, it also led to the continuous flow of the Knights of the Lost Country who went to the Argosy Islands to reclaim the deserted islands. Charlotte protested to Braun, but received a handwritten letter from His Royal Highness the Crown Prince Brunhilde, in which he affectionately called him brother and enthusiastically praised the friendship between the two. Finally, as the Crown Prince of Braun, he begged Charlotte to take in these refugees and relieve the pressure of the war for Braun. At the same time, he promised to give Charlotte a batch of supplies as a reward for Moldova to bear the hard work of the refugees. Charlotte had no choice but to accept this friendship. There are many islands in the Ager Sea. Even if all the people from the 10 small countries occupied by Zimmerman were taken there would be enough land there. Moreover, this group of people can be completely digested after a long time, and they will become the foundation of the Duchy of Mechlin. Charlotte stayed in Moldova for less than a month before the first battle came. Zimmerman did not choose Moldova, but only sent 20 tree gods. When Charlotte received the intelligence, he brought his men to the foot of the Gondian Mountains. Seeing the plant-based warriors climbing over the mountains and the tree gods floating in the sky, he couldn't help but complain, "Zimmerman is really good at making things happen." He didn't know that Zimmerman had also used this sentence to complain about him. Chapter 593 New War. Charlotte commanded the army to form a battle formation. The land battleships and centurions that had just been transported appeared at the forefront of the army. The extraordinary is the decisive force on the battlefield, and the holy level is the key to victory. But both the extraordinary and the holy level are too rare, especially the holy level. Charlotte also wants to know whether these two new alchemical weapons can play the expected role. The best place to test new weapons is the battlefield. A tree god launched an attack first. It dived at a high speed, emitting two black fighting spirit balls, which exploded on a land battleship. The defense magic array of this land battleship remained motionless and steadily resisted the attack of the holy tree god. However, the centurion raised his rifle and shot into the sky, which seemed a little weak. Ordinary rifle bullets could not break the defense at all, and it was extremely difficult to hit the flying tree god. A round of shooting did not achieve any results. The tree god envoys joined the battle one after another, but the defensive magic array of the land battleships had to be redesigned by dozens of ancient alchemists, and it was incredibly stable. This group of tree god envoys who used the power of the evil god to advance to the saint rank had a single means of attack, and did not have as many rich tricks as the normal saint rank. There was no better way to use magic except to bombard with all their might. Charlotte did not let his saint ranks participate in the battle. Looking at the fierce battle between the tree god envoys and the land battleships and the centurions, he smiled slightly and said, "A brand new war mode is about to start." Charlotte knew the disadvantages of the combination of land battleships and centurions, and knew how to make up for their disadvantages, but she deliberately did not make any changes. In addition to the defensive magic array, the land battleships had almost no weapons, which was completely different from the tanks on Earth. The centurions were only equipped with ordinary rifles, and Charlotte did not give them the expensive standard armor-breaking bombs. This combination can be invincible on the battlefields of ordinary people, or even on the battlefields where extraordinary people intervene, but they are helpless when encountering saint ranks. In a short period of time, the saint order could not do anything to the centurions who were protected by land battleships, but neither the land battleships nor the centurions could threaten the saint order. As long as they could be equipped with large-caliber alchemical artillery, or invest in the research and development of new alchemical gunpowder, and develop bullets that were more powerful than the magic-breaking armor-bombing shells, they could make up for this shortcoming. But Charlotte did not make similar instructions, because when such weapons could not threaten the saint order, the promotion would not be hindered. Once they could threaten even the saint order, Charlotte's Duchy of Mechlin would become the target of public criticism, and all the saints of the old world would be his enemies. However, Charlotte's failure to promote it did not mean that other countries would not either. If Bayern could get the centurions, he would definitely equip them with ultra-long-range continuous fire alchemical rifles, which would be equivalent to sharing the pressure for the Duchy of Mechlin. Once all the countries of the old world were involved in this arms race, Charlotte could use the first-mover advantage to allow the Duchy of Mechlin to develop rapidly and have the best of both worlds. As the saying goes, a half step ahead is a genius, a step ahead is a madman. There is also an old Chinese saying, "Success does not have to be mine." Soon those plant-based warriors also rushed into the battlefield. The land battleships were not fast, but after entering the battlefield, they emitted a layer of blood-colored light. The plant-based warriors that came into contact with this layer of blood-colored light withered immediately. However, the land battleships could only devour vitality, and could do nothing about the strong evil power of these warriors. Facing these evil warriors, the centurions finally showed their power. Under the protection of the land battleships, most of the evil warriors were weakened. They began to advance slowly, using rifles for long-range combat and knights' lances for close combat. Soon, they plowed more than 10 gullies in the plant-based warriors. At the beginning of the battle, it was one-sided. However, those plant warriors had no human emotions and were fearless. The number of land battleships and centurions was small, so they quickly broke through this layer of defense at the cost of sacrificing 1 or 2% of the soldiers and rushed to the battle formation of the Knights of Favonius in the rear. Charlotte tested the combat power of the land battleships and centurions, and no longer stood idly by. With a wave of her hand, the Knights of Favonius slowly moved, and dozens of holy orders took off and fought with those tree gods. Charlotte Mecklen had commanded many battles, and there were at least hundreds of them in total, but it was the first time that such a large scale and so many holy orders participated, even catching up with the Battle of Philandon. Soon a tree god was killed, and its body fell down, but it did not fall straight to the ground, but turned a strange corner in the air and fell behind the formation of the Knights of Favonius. There was a huge battleship there, and the only battleship that could be seen on land was the Holy Light Kingdom. The tree god landed on the Holy Light Kingdom and disappeared without a trace. Only Charlotte could see that a young man jumped up and hugged the body of the tree god. Countless eyeballs appeared all over his body, and these eyeballs soon appeared on the body of the tree god. Charlotte took a look and didn't dare to look again. He had never taken action. As a commander, he should not participate in the battle, but should command the army and provide his subordinates with battle plans at any time so that they can choose the best tactics. Charlotte kept giving orders, and the saints in the sky also responded quickly. They used the tactics that Charlotte had told them before. More than 10 people held off most of the tree gods, creating an opportunity for the 5 most powerful saints to besiege a tree god. In just a few minutes, the unlucky tree god was smashed in the chest by Agon's hammer, and his body fell in the air, turned a corner, and landed on the Holy Light Kingdom. This time, Charlotte saw the elegant Depakaloado, who was as elegant as an elf princess, embrace the tree god with his arms and grabbed the tree god. The branches on its body began to grow wildly, but the branches that grew out were no longer under their control. Depakaloado easily grasped the tree god. Depakaloado had just devoured the tree god, and the 5 holy ranks responsible for the group fight knocked down another tree god. Because he was not a holy rank yet, Arsène Lupin could only watch the battle on the ground. He couldn't help but feel cold in his heart. The holy rank battles he had seen in his life were all one-on-one. Both sides looked for opponents according to their strength. After a fight, the deaths were very even. Where had he seen such a rogue, shameless, and ruthless killing? He was originally worried that more than 20 holy rank tree gods might not be able to withstand even the 4 empires. But he never thought that Charlotte not only had a secret weapon, but also such a breakthrough tactic. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 594 Peak Battle. When the 7th tree god fell from the sky, the evil army began to retreat. Charlotte issued an order to give up the pursuit. The Ganges Mountains were too steep. Ordinary soldiers and land warships could not flip through them. Although the centurions could try to flip through them, without the protection of land warships, the real combat power of the centurions was only equivalent to the low-level high-level extraordinary, and there was no crushing advantage. As for the saints under Charlotte, he was reluctant to use them to fight a pursuit war. The ancient military tactics of the Great Eastern country said, "Don't chase the desperate enemy." Well, Charlotte was reluctant to lose the precious combat power of the saints. The operators of the land warships and the centurions' drivers all climbed out of the iron cans. Even the old continent version of the tanks built by magic alchemy still couldn't solve the heat dissipation problem. The inside of the land warships was stuffy, and there was no air conditioning in this world, so the operators could only bear it. Charlotte had thought about assigning a member who was proficient in air or ice magic to each land battleship, but the number of extraordinary people was already very small, and it was almost impossible to specifically designate a certain type of extraordinary person. There were simply not enough people. This group of operators climbed out of the land battleship and desperately replenished their drinking water. They were so hot that they even stuck out their tongues. The centurion drivers were slightly better, but due to technical problems, they used their legs to operate the centurions, and their thighs were worn out. Their legs were sore and they were rubbing them hard. Some even took off their boots and moved their very wet feet. The long-term combat capabilities of the land battleship and the centurion were still very poor, but based on the quality that could be tested at present, it was already very good. These two weapons need a long time of improvement before they can be gradually perfected. After the Knights of Favonius withdrew from the battlefield, a group of reserve warriors went to the battlefield, collected the remains of the killed plant soldiers, and transported them back to the Holy Light Kingdom. Although the evil power contained in these remains was far less than that of the tree gods, they were still very delicious ingredients for the Holy Light Kingdom. Charlotte shook her head and thought, for now, the battle still depends on the Holy Order. But if there is no Holy Order, land battleships and centurions can already withstand the middle and low-level extraordinary people. If the number of these things increases, even high-level extraordinary people will have to kneel. Andreas landed beside Charlotte and whispered, these iron guys are really awesome. With them, we don't need the Holy Order to clear the infantry anymore. Charlotte nodded and said, they are the best auxiliary of the Holy Order. In the future, everyone will be equipped with a centurion cavalry team. Charlotte would not tell Andreas that this thing was to replace the Holy Order in the end, that would be too unemotional. Andreas was obviously very happy and said, it's just that the comfort is too poor, otherwise I would like to get a centurion. Charlotte nodded and said, the comfort of land battleships and centurions is indeed too poor, but there is still room for improvement. Soon the battlefield was cleared. Charlotte left an army to monitor the Gandis Mountains and led the main force back to Brittany Castle. Charlotte did not use the troops assisted by various countries in this attack. When he returned to Brittany, the generals of Byron came to protest, thinking that Charlotte deprived them of the opportunity to make achievements. Charlotte did not expect that there would be such a warlike soldier. She immediately apologized and asked the general of Byron to lead the troops to the Gandis Mountains, and told him that Zimmerman's evil army could cross the mountains at any time and invade again, so he must hold his position. Charlotte didn't understand why General Byron, who was just filled with righteous indignation and bravely challenged the enemy, suddenly turned pale, but he didn't dare to make any rebuttal. He retreated in disgrace and actually led his troops to leave Brittany Castle and go to the Gandis Mountains. Charlotte didn't understand what this guy was thinking. He also called the military generals of various countries to the Duke of Brittany's palace, which was rebuilt based on the original Duke's palace, and held a small meeting to let everyone speak freely. If they were willing to go to the Gandis Mountains, they could lead their troops to the battlefield now. If they were not ready for the time being, please assist the Knights of Favonius and do some logistical work. These soldiers from various countries seemed to fail to understand Charlotte's meaning and express their willingness to stay in Brittany Castle. Charlotte quickly dismembered the troops sent by various countries, splitting out a large number of personnel and stuffing them into the Knights of Favonius. On the first day when this group of people joined the Knights of Favonius, the chief officer personally asked if they needed a welfare house, and reminded them that they could choose any region in the Duchy of Mechlin, and even go to Cappadocia in Ingrima, St. Michael Island, and the Argels Islands. Those who go to the Argels Islands can get a piece of land. And it was reminded that the Holy Light God Kingdom was also open to the lower-level soldiers of the Knights of Favonius, but they could only go once a week and had to wait in line. Charlotte didn't even deliberately recruit these people. These policies were the internal policies of the Knights of Favonius, and almost all soldiers enjoyed similar benefits. However, it was these ordinary internal policies that produced a subtle effect. Soon the generals of various countries found that they could no longer command the soldiers who were temporarily transferred to the Knights of Favonius by Charlotte. Charlotte did not focus on these miscellaneous matters. Zimmerman did not come to Moldova, so he naturally went to the city of Cher. He was very concerned about the battle situation in the city of Cher. Baron was very happy to share this kind of information. A few days later, Charlotte learned about the battle in Cher City. Zimmerman had indeed arrived in Cher City. He joined forces with another immigrant army to defeat the coalition of countries in the old continent. Zimmerman personally took action, but was taken over by Juno, who hurried over. This Baron's strongest man, Charlotte's teacher, showed the style of a peak former. He fought a fierce battle with Zimmerman and easily defeated this powerful man who was famous on the continent and won this peak battle. When Charlotte learned the news, he was extremely shocked. He knew that his teacher Juno had hidden a lot of strength, but he didn't expect that he could actually defeat Zimmerman head-on. However, after Charlotte used the magic alchemy communication equipment to personally consult Juno about this battle, it was not so easy. Juno's answer was, Zimmerman has not recovered his strength yet. He is only at level 21. I defeated him only because I had the advantage of my level. If he breaks through again, such as being promoted to level 22 or even level 23, even if I still have the advantage of my level, I may not be able to win. If Zimmerman recovers to the peak of the saint level, I will definitely not be his opponent. Chapter 595 is the other one. Charlotte Mechlin? A few days later, Charlotte received a letter. When he opened the letter, it was blank, but suddenly he was in a battlefield. Charlotte had had countless experiences and knew that this was Juno's dreamland, but he really didn't know that the teacher had reached the point where he could use a letter to transmit a dreamland to others through the air. In the battlefield of the dreamland, Zimmerman floated in the air, and Juno was well-mannered, wearing a traditional dress, looking very formal. Zimmerman lowered his head and smiled slightly, saying, "Teacher Juno, I still benefit a lot from the shooting skills you taught me." Juno also smiled brightly and said, "You are one of the two most talented young people I have ever met. At that time, I really hoped that you could join the Blood Clan." Zimmerman laughed dumbly and asked, "The other one is Charlotte Mecklen?" Juno nodded and said, "Yes." Zimmerman shook his head, and after a long while, he said, "If the teacher was talking about someone else, I would definitely not accept it, but Charlotte, just because he can take away Manny. I admit that he is my opponent, the most important opponent in my life." The muscles on Juno's face trembled for a while, and he activated several Arthur's secret methods to suppress the feeling of wanting to laugh. Although Juno Arthur was not afraid of Zimmerman, he also knew that if he laughed at this moment, Zimmerman would most likely go berserk. Charlotte saw this scene, sweat on her face and back, hot sweat and cold sweat, and her mood was quite complicated. He really didn't snatch Senior Mendelman away. Maybe Mendelman felt a little more than a senior or junior for him, but that had nothing to do with him. Well, this is not the words of a scumbag, this is the truth. It was only after seeing this scene that Charlotte realized that Juno had also taught Zimmerman Arthur's spearmanship. Juno was a good teacher and loved to teach young talents of the human race Arthur's secrets. This habit was really unpopular. He was also a little embarrassed at the same time. Juno didn't say these words to Zimmerman alone, but openly said them in front of the coalition forces of various countries, almost like announcing to all the strong men in the old continent that he was optimistic about Charlotte Mecklen. The most incredible thing is that Zimmerman, who was listed together, was so proud that the whole old continent knew how much he was proud, but he actually admitted that Charlotte Mecklen could be on par with her, and said in person, "I admit that he is the most important opponent in my life." This is almost equivalent to announcing to the entire old continent that the former strongest man in the old continent and the current strongest man in Baron both believe that Charlotte Mecklen is their future peer. Charlotte's reputation has spread throughout the old continent, but it is mainly because of his talent. Then there's his romance. Recently, it is his political and military talents. After all, he was able to obtain the most abundant fruits in a war and became the Duke of Mecklen, opening up a Mecklen dukedom that is almost as good as the four major empires. If such a person does not have the ability, no one in the old continent will be a talent. But this time, it is equivalent to the top few people in the old continent admitting that Charlotte is still a cultivation genius and the future peak of the saint level. Becoming an extremely strong person is much more impressive than becoming a duke. Juno and Zimmerman in the dreamland didn't talk too much and started fighting soon. Zimmerman was much stronger than when he was besieged by Charlotte and his men. He used his brilliant fighting spirit to perfection, and he didn't even use any evil god power. Charlotte only looked at Zimmerman's various methods and knew that he didn't deserve to lose last time. Except for those senior peak masters, such as his brother-in-law Antonio, and Romeo's and others, they were definitely not his opponents. Juno only used the blood demon spear. Under Juno's superb Arthur's spearmanship, every bullet of this holy weapon was aimed at Zimmerman's flaws. Zimmerman's strong and unparalleled brilliant fighting spirit was full of flaws under Juno's spearmanship. Even if there were no flaws, Juno could force them to be created. After half an hour of fighting, Zimmerman was shot 3 times. These 3 blood energy bullets were obviously very strange. Even Zimmerman, who had already embarked on the path to godhood, could not bear it. He only held on for more than 10 minutes before calmly withdrawing from the battle. Although Zimmerman was defeated, judging from the battle scene, the two sides were evenly matched, and Juno had the upper hand. But to say that she could defeat Zimmerman, Charlotte didn't quite believe it. Even though Juno's record was already amazing and he could force Zimmerman back single-handedly, Charlotte was still deeply worried about the future after watching this battle. Well, he and Zimmerman had a grudge for stealing roses. Charlotte believed that no matter what she said, Zimmerman would not believe his innocence. After watching this battle, the fantasy dreamland attached to the letter quietly collapsed. Charlotte knew that Juno had sent the letter to teach him a lesson, to teach him how to fight against Zimmerman, and to let him know Zimmerman's strength in advance, so he was very grateful. Charlotte arranged Medova's affairs a little bit, and went straight to Shell City alone. Whether there was a chance or not, he wanted to try to kill Zimmerman under Shell City. Shell City might gather the top strong men in the old continent, which was much stronger than the Holy Group under his command. If he couldn't kill Zimmerman in Shell City, Charlotte really didn't know what chance he would have. Charlotte had never been to Shell City, so she couldn't use the infinite mirror world to go directly there, so she could only use the light agility technique to fly all the way. Charlotte had fought with Zimmerman, and he raised her to X-27, which could be raised to X-32 with a red and blue rattlesnake. She was the first to make the contribution. Although Zimmerman was powerful, he couldn't catch Charlotte, who was so fast. Charlotte actually wanted to improve his agility by one more point, but he tried and it seemed that X-27 was the limit of his agility. When he was on the road, he was indeed almost at his limit with his agility of X-27. Charlotte soon saw the city of Cher. He wanted to go into Cher first and meet all the acquaintances, but the battle in the sky attracted all his attention. An old man in a white robe was throwing all kinds of spells and fighting with Zimmerman in full swing. What surprised Charlotte Mecklen was that this old man not only did not lose the upper hand, but also firmly occupied the advantage. His spells looked messy and disorganized, but the combination of different spells formed a wonderful effect. Zimmerman was exhausted and looked a little more embarrassed than when he fought with Juno. Charlotte recognized this old man in a white robe. Chapter 596. The great philosopher Borosher, disciple of the living and walking miracle child. After Zimmerman's era, each of the 5 empires had its strongest leader. Fars was Count Maclean Breton, now the Emperor of Brittany. Byron was Juno Arthur. Inglemer was Count Lanmaroc of Champagne, the father of Ben Lanmaroc. The most tragic leader of the Black Phoenix dynasty was Count Constantine, but the Black Phoenix dynasty no longer exists. The Lionheart dynasty also had its strongest leader, and this strongest leader had a close relationship with Charlotte. He was the great philosopher Borosher who wrote a comment on his novel, The First Wonderful Book in the World. Because of this comment, the Lionheart dynasty also ordered 100,000 copies from Anne's bookstore, and added a new edition of the book with the evaluation of this great philosopher on the title page. Borosher is known as the last great philosopher of the time, and also the only great philosopher in the world. There are many sayings about him, but the most important point is that all the great philosophers are ancient people, and only this one is a living person. This great philosopher is a miracle in the Lionheart dynasty and is also the supreme mascot. No one has ever seen him take action, but no one has ever dared to doubt the strength of this great philosopher. He created several night secrets, created at least 9 holy ranks, and put forward countless insights, and was regarded as the embodiment of knowledge. You know, just based on the words of this great philosopher, the Lionheart dynasty can subscribe to 100,000 copies of Charlotte's new edition books. His influence can be imagined. Speaking of which, the legend of this great philosopher is even more magical than Zimmerman. Well, in fact, it is mainly because his teacher Don Quixote Cervantes is very magical. If Robin Axel Zimmerman's life is simply a legend, Don Quixote Cervantes' life is a miracle created by the most evil big devil as a joke. Don Quixote Cervantes has a nickname, the Walking Miracle Son. He was born dull, not a genius like Robin Axel Zimmerman. He did not even finish primary education and dropped out of school because of poor grades, but he was obsessed with night novels. He read them day and night, and even his parents could not control him. Such a child would definitely become a waste. He could not even complete primary education, and it was difficult for him to find a decent job. He could only do odd jobs or sell his labor. But Don Quixote Cervantes read almost all the night novels in the empire, and could no longer find new stories. When he was bored, he suddenly had an idea and began to write a unique night novel. He succeeded in one fell swoop and became the king of night novels in the empire. The high sales of his novels were enough for him to live the most decent life. Before Anne Maclean came out, Don Quixote Cervantes was the most famous novelist in the old world. Princess May and Anne were both fans of his novels. The novel that Princess May read on the ship was the work of Don Quixote Cervantes. Well, Charlotte commented at the time that the writing was rough and the story was old-fashioned, not as good as those newcomers who couldn't even sign a contract, and asked for comments on who. What can they read? Princess May Guillaume commented that, do you know how many stories of joy and sorrow, love and hate, magnificent and ups and downs they have created? Do you know how deeply they analyze the human heart, respect morality, love the world, and sympathize with the world, She almost taught Charlotte Mecklen, the treacherous minister, a lesson on behalf of these writers. As for later, everyone knows it. Charlotte defeated these authors who had been out of fashion for hundreds of years, including Don Quixote Cervantes. He didn't even know that he had defeated the former best-selling author in the Old World. If it were limited to novels, Don Quixote Cervantes would be just so-so. But writing novels was just the beginning of his legend. At that time, Don Quixote Cervantes was still very young, so at a banquet, he couldn't bear the sullenness of being ignored, and made a bet with a nobleman, and became the biggest joke of the empire, because he bet that he could become a swordsman within 3 months and beat the nobleman. The nobleman was known for his swordsmanship. He had been learning swordsmanship for 20 years and had defeated countless opponents in his life, whether on the battlefield or in the duel, and had only lost 3 times in total in hundreds of battles. Don Quixote Cervantes had missed the best age to practice swordsmanship, and even if he had learned it since childhood, no one would think highly of him. After all, Don Quixote Cervantes was born in poverty, and no one thought that a person who didn't even have a family swordsmanship could be comparable to a noble who had received the most perfect swordsmanship training since childhood. 3 months later, Don Quixote Cervantes once again created a miracle under the attention of the public. He actually learned the peerless swordsmanship from the night novel, and defeated his opponent in a fierce battle, becoming famous in the empire. This person's life was almost accompanied by countless miracles. Until he was 30 years old, Don Quixote Cervantes suddenly claimed that he had received divine revelation and founded the Lionheart Castle University of the Dead in alchemy. He became the founder of this university and served as the first president. Everyone felt that he had expanded to the point of blasphemy, because only gods in the world could have believers and founded universities. But no one thought that the god of the dead in alchemy claimed by Don Quixote Cervantes would repeatedly perform miracles, and eventually make the Lionheart Castle University of the Dead in alchemy the first university in the Lionheart dynasty. At this point in life, it has reached the pinnacle. Even a genius like Robin Axel Zimmerman, such a legend, is far less than the great achievements of Don Quixote Cervantes' life. That's why he is called the walking miracle son. If Don Quixote Cervantes' life ended here, he would be regarded as the spokesperson of God on earth, a saint who once lived on earth, the embodiment of wisdom, the embodiment of miracles. But after teaching for decades, Don Quixote Cervantes suddenly began to secretly slaughter nobles. When his beloved disciples exposed his crimes, the secret laboratory of the Lionheart Castle and Dead in Alchemy University was already covered with the bones. It is said that this person slaughtered thousands of people, and each of them died in a very miserable way. It is unknown how much torture he suffered before his death. The emperor of the Lionheart dynasty at that time certainly could not tolerate such a vicious guy, but the imperial soldiers who went to capture him were defeated by him alone, and he broke into the palace, killed the queen and the crown prince in front of the emperor, and boiled a pot of tea with the emperor's silver teapot, drank a leisurely afternoon tea, and then left calmly. So far, this person's fierceness is unparalleled. The Lionheart dynasty didn't know how to punish such a vicious man. Fortunately, he disappeared from the scene since then. Boluaz was one of the 6 disciples he taught personally. Well, it was he who reported his teacher back then. Chapter 597 Return My Jade Secret Scroll. Charlotte even suspected that Boluaz praised his novels because of his old grudge with his teacher Don Quixote Cervantes. Well, he heard a little gossip when he was in the Lionheart dynasty. 5 of Don Quixote Cervantes' 6 disciples were very mysterious. No information has ever been circulated, including the names of some disciples. The only one who officially appeared in front of the public was Boluaz. There are many rumors about this matter. The most widely circulated rumor is that Don Quixote Cervantes asked the 6 disciples to infiltrate the top leaders of the 5 empires, hoping that they could seize power. According to this rumor, the most suspicious person in the Fars Empire is Wood Brandon. However, Charlotte believes that Wood Brandon is unlikely to be Don Quixote Cervantes' disciple. After all, he is a vampire who is hundreds of years old. Don Quixote Cervantes is an authentic human being and is not that old. Charlotte did not go to the battlefield, but sprayed slightly off the direction and bypassed a battle area between Zimmerman and Boluaz. But it is true that the tree wants to be still, but the wind does not stop. Charlotte is irrelevant, and Zimmerman doesn't like him. When this powerful man who is famous in the continent sees Charlotte, he bravely enters Boluaz's great collapse technique head-on, rushes out of the battle circle, and points the long sword in his hand directly at Charlotte. Charlotte was startled and shouted, "Zimmerman! "What are you doing?" Zimmerman shouted. "Give me back my jade secret scroll." Charlotte screamed. "What jade secret scroll? Isn't that a secret treasure made by the great Zimmerman? How could I have the thing?" The legal ownership of the Emerald Secret Scroll must belong to the Fars Empire. Although Charlotte is the son-in-law of the Breton family, it is impossible for him to occupy such an important secret treasure at will. Moreover, he knows the truth that the man is innocent but guilty of possessing the treasure, and he will never admit that this thing is in his hands. Zimmerman is not investigating a case. He does not need evidence at all. He is 100% sure that the Emerald Secret Scroll is in Charlotte's hands. This secret treasure is very important to him, and he must not lose it. He would rather give up the battle with Bor-Azhar, and he must catch Charlotte Mecklen and take back this supreme creation of human alchemy. Charlotte activated the Light Agility X-27 and fought with Zimmerman in the air. He and Zimmerman are about the same level. Both of them are 21st level, but their strength is far beyond their level. Charlotte can be regarded as at least strong 22nd level, and Zimmerman's combat power is even more exaggerated, enough to sweep the peak of the Saint level in the New World, which is slightly inferior to super strong people like Juno and Bor-Azhar. In theory, Charlotte would be at a great disadvantage and very dangerous, and would be killed by Zimmerman soon. In fact, Charlotte swam all over the sky, as active as a spring carp, and Zimmerman could not find a chance to fight with him at all. The two could only shoot Dowkey bullets from a distance. Both of them learned shooting skills from Juno. Although Charlotte was far inferior in strength, he practiced a blazing fiery bullet Trex 18, and the hand of flame Trex 18. In this kind of shooting scene, he took a lot of advantages. It was obviously Charlotte who was running all over the sky and did not dare to face the enemy head-on, but the scene looked equally matched. Bor-Azhar did not continue to attack, but just floated in the sky and began to chant. Whether it was Zimmerman or Charlotte, they did not dare to look down on the last great philosopher of mankind. Although Bor-Azhar could have his current status, first, he had a good teacher, and second, he had a good teacher, but how could a person who dared to betray even the so-called loving miracle child not have some brushes? Bor-Azhar's chanting upset Zimmerman, who thought, "If I let this old man finish his chanting, it will be a world-shattering blow. I must interrupt his spellcasting." Zimmerman had just thought of this when he saw the light of the magic circle coming out of Bor-Azhar's body. He then realized that Bor-Azhar was not chanting offensive magic just now, but had added a defensive magic circle to himself. In a normal battle, where would he have the time to activate the magic circle so calmly? Charlotte had another kind of admiration in her heart. He had always wanted to use the magic circle alone, so that he could have perfect protection in battle, but whether it was the radiant magic circle or the original blood boundary, he had never been able to complete the formation independently. Bor-Azhar could use it easily by himself, which really made Charlotte envious and jealous. However, when she thought of his identity as the only great human philosopher in the world, it seemed acceptable. Bor-Azhar released the defensive magic circle and immediately began the second round of chanting. Zimmerman was horrified. Bor-Azhar had a defensive magic circle, and even he couldn't break it easily. If the old man immediately launched another grand attack magic, he would definitely be in trouble. Zimmerman didn't care about continuing to fight with Charlotte, and pulled away, and was about to withdraw from the battle. Charlotte felt that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She took out the red and blue rattlesnake and shot repeatedly, trying to delay Zimmerman and buy time for Bor-Azhar to launch an attack. Zimmerman's several fierce counterattacks were avoided by Charlotte using the light agility technique. The two fought in the sky for 7 or 8 minutes, and Zimmerman finally got rid of Charlotte's entanglement, but at this moment, the second layer of defensive magic circle lit up on Bor-Azhar's body. Charlotte didn't even look at it again, and withdrew from the battle at the same time, heading straight for the city of Shell. Zimmerman was filled with rage and had no idea how to vent it. He looked at Bor-Azhar, who was still chanting, and believed that this old man could cast a third layer of defensive magic circle on him. He would be completely helpless. He gracefully performed an imperial salute and floated back to the camp. When Charlotte entered the city of Cher, she saw the flag of Fars. The residents of this small town had been relocated, and all the buildings had been requisitioned and used as military camps. The Fars army occupied several streets, and Fars flags were hung everywhere to distinguish the territories of the major nobles. Charlotte saw the emblem of the Breton family and landed nearby. Then she saw Antonio and greeted him with joy. Antonio said, "Charlotte, father is here too, let's go see him together." Charlotte missed the old emperor very much. The old emperor had already agreed to the marriage, and now she wanted to get married as soon as possible to avoid facing the torture of Sherfield. As for after marriage, at least her brother-in-law did not stop him from having an illegitimate child after marriage. The old emperor of Brittany was very moved when he saw Charlotte. The last time he saw Charlotte was because of the rebellion. Charlotte said that the rebellion of Axel's family could be quelled in a month, and it really was quelled in a month. Charlotte also met Princess Axel at the same time. The princess had a complicated expression, and she only greeted Charlotte lightly when she saw her. Charlotte could understand that the princess was not in a very high mood, facing her son, who came back from the dead. Zimmerman could be regarded as a top-notch rebellious son. Chapter 598, Not Playing Black Myth. The old emperor was very affectionate to Charlotte and said, "I originally wanted to hold 2 weddings when I returned to Strasbourg, me and Axel, you and Anne. But I didn't expect that the damn war would be like a nightmare that would never go away." Charlotte sighed. The old emperor pretended that he didn't know, but he really didn't want to fight. Marrying Anne, living a happy life in Strasbourg and Mecklenburg, occasionally going to the hot spring mountain for vacation, or even taking a legendary warship to go for a ride on the sea. Wouldn't this thing be much more fun than a luxury yacht? He couldn't understand why Baron and Far started a war in the first place. Even if they divided the Black Phoenix in the end, so what? Didn't he still take the best piece of land? What's the point? Moreover, whether it was Fars or Baron, although they still maintained the dignity of the empire, the economies of the 2 countries would definitely decline for a while, and the living standards in the country would not improve. Although Ingrima and the Lionheart dynasty were better, it couldn't be said that there was no impact. This time, Charlotte was very sure that it was not the power of humans that pushed the war. It was them who pushed this war. The evil gods of the New World, the evil gods of the Old World, the 9 righteous gods, and those who wanted to ascend to the god level. These people were the forces that pushed the war. Charlotte didn't know how long this war would last, but he knew deeply that the power behind the scenes that pushed the war did not need victory, but the war itself. So this war will not end soon, nor will it be decided soon. Both sides will fight until they are exhausted and their national strength is empty, until a new world pattern emerges. Princess Axa whispered, "I don't care about the war, I just want to know what Zimmerman wants to do next. If he really has the ability to toss, just take all those illegitimate children over, and even take all his women over, so as not to give me a headache anymore." Charlotte's forehead was slightly sweaty. She didn't want to take up this topic, and she didn't dare to take it up. Those children are now surnamed Mecklen, and Princess Axel has never known about this. Logically speaking, those children are all the grandchildren of Princess Axel, and they are considered to be her bloodline. They are also the bloodline of the 2 major families of Axel and Robin. Even if the maternal bloodline is counted, there are nearly 100 families in the whole Fars. If there are hundreds of years, when the Mecklen family has branches and leaves, this family can even be called the source of the nobility of the Old World, and almost all the nobles can find their bloodline in the Mecklen family. Charlotte didn't know what the scene would be like. Charlotte asked about Anne, and was very pleased to learn that Anne was managing government affairs for her father and brother in Strasbourg, and she was doing better and better. After all, Anne had the experience of presiding over government affairs in Mecklenburg, commanding the army, and resisting the New World Congress. After going through trials, some people can hone extremely excellent abilities. Charlotte spent half a day in the Fars military garrison and then went to the military zone of Bayron. Although Fars and Barrow are hostile, the high-ranking nobles still frequently interact with each other. Juno once went to Fars to study. And Grand Duchess Misu also has friendships with the high-ranking nobles of Barrow. Charlotte has many friends in Barrow. When he arrived at the military zone of Barrow, he did not see his teacher Juno, but met Count Constantine, who was also an old acquaintance. Count Constantine looked much better than the last time they met, and even a little high-spirited and youthful. When he saw Charlotte, he asked, "Andreas said that he is living a very comfortable life with you." Charlotte smiled and said, "Andreas likes to be lively." Count Constantine was silent for a long time before saying, "He has no offspring yet, so it is a good thing to keep his human identity." Charlotte didn't know what to say. He was not sure if Andreas had any offspring. Constantine should have been reincarnated as a vampire. His every move had the feminine aura of a vampire. However, because of this, the current strength of Count Constantine should be even stronger. Charlotte asked on a whim, "What do you think of Zimmerman?" Count Constantine said indifferently, Since Juno and Balazar were able to repel him, I can probably do the same. However, if he continues to grow stronger, none of us will be his opponent. Charlotte sighed and said, he will definitely continue to grow stronger, and the peak of the saint level will not be his limit. Count Constantine glanced at Charlotte and said indifferently, next, it depends on the will of the gods. Charlotte agreed. The two of them had no friendship or familiarity, so they were a little out of words when they talked about this. Count Constantine pondered for a moment, took out a rapier, handed it to Charlotte, and said, help me give it to Andreas, and help me keep an eye on him. Don't take too many risks. If it were before, his strength would be enough to travel across the continent, but now the holy rank is no longer enough. Juno left temporarily, probably to find a way to defeat Zimmerman, and may not come back for a few days. Charlotte took the rapier and said, I will pass it to Andreas, and I will keep him away from danger. You know, I never let my subordinates take risks. Since teacher Juno is not here, I will come to visit later. Juno is not here, and Count Constantine is the commander-in-chief of Bayern. In fact, even if Juno is here, Count Constantine is in charge of military affairs. Although Juno has a very high status, he is too idle and basically does not care about worldly affairs. Charlotte came over. Juno was not here, so she was naturally brought to see him. At this time, Charlotte said goodbye and left. Just after leaving the office temporarily requisitioned by Constantine, she saw a warm Julian. He opened his arms and called out, Charlotte. Long time no see. Charlotte also opened her arms and hugged this good friend. The two of them were really close. Charlotte let go of Julian and couldn't help but say, you have also been promoted to the saint level. Julian shrugged his shoulders and said, hard work will always be rewarded. By the way, the youngest saint level in the old world is 100% Julian Asilo. Charlotte couldn't help but smile slightly and said, that's true. Andreas is very old now. In fact, both of them knew that Ben Landmark had been promoted to the saint level not long ago and had snatched the title of the youngest saint level from Andreas, but they tacitly didn't mention it. Julian said, I'll treat you to a meal. But there's nothing good to eat here. You have to go to another block, the military area of Ingrima, to find a good restaurant. The Ingrima people are very particular and have specially guaranteed a supply of materials for that restaurant. Chapter 599 Good Friends Gathering. Charlotte certainly had no objection. He said, since we are going to the military zone of Ingrima, let's find two more friends. Julian smiled and said, Bam Landmark is here, but Miss Sume is not here. She is a civilian and does not need to go to the battlefield. Charlotte was very sad when she heard this. He was also a civilian, but at least half of his working time was spent on fighting, and there was too little time to deal with documents. Julian was familiar with the city of Cher. He quickly took Charlotte to a restaurant and asked a passing child to run errands and call Ben Landmark over at the cost of one of the smallest currency of Byron. Of course, Julian was very experienced and did not pay him in advance. About half an hour later, Ben Landmark appeared in the restaurant. The youngest lion in Britain was also very happy to see Charlotte. Since he lost the duel to Charlotte, he regarded the other party as his best friend. Well, friendship comes inexplicably, but it is deep and deep. As for Julian, the two of them only became familiar with each other in Cher City. After all, they were both the most outstanding young people in their respective countries. Many young people disappeared on the battlefield, and many others were tempered and grew up on the battlefield. Charlotte, Ben Landmark, and Julian Asilo were all typical examples of people who had experienced hardships and grown up. The three of them ordered something casually. The restaurant in this small town was not as prosperous as the capitals of Fars, Ingrima, and Baron where they usually lived. Even the entire set meal could not be provided. They could only serve some bread, jam, and scented tea. Even coffee was missing, but they could buy large bottles of milk. Ben Landmark usually doesn't like to talk, but at this moment he was very excited and said to the two of them, I really want to challenge Zimmerman. Julian was startled and said, you'd better not go, he will definitely kill you. We haven't grown to our limits yet, and it's meaningless to challenge Zimmerman now. Ben Landmark glanced at Charlotte and said, I thought I was one step ahead because I was promoted to the saint level earlier than Charlotte, but I didn't expect that I am only at the 20th level so far, but he can already fight Zimmerman back and forth. Charlotte smiled slightly and said, I didn't rely on my real strength. When I was promoted to the saint level, I used all my energy on the art of agility. Julian shook his head and said, basic superpowers have their limits. The upper limit of the art of agility should be the 18th level. We can reach that level sooner or later. There is no need to consume our superpowers on this kind of escapability in advance. Charlotte was slightly surprised and thought, 18 levels? My agility technique stopped improving after reaching X27. Is there some misunderstanding? Charlotte asked a few questions in an indirect way and got a common sense. That is, all superpowers have an upper limit. Ordinary superpowers can be superimposed more than 18 times, which is consistent with Charlotte's flaming hands and blazing bombs. Strong superpowers will be halved, and many superpowers can only be superimposed 6 or 7 times. There is no higher record in the entire old continent. Charlotte was born in a humble family. He was just the son of a merchant. He practiced all the way up, relying on good luck and evil gods. He did not have sufficient educational resources like Julian and Ben Landmark, and would not lack extraordinary knowledge, let alone extraordinary common sense. Although he was taught by Juno, Juno would not teach such a simple thing. Charlotte did not give up and asked, what if a superpower is superimposed to more than 18 levels? What will happen? Julian shrugged his shoulders and was about to speak when Ben Landmark said, God level. Seeing Charlotte's confused face, he explained, only by being promoted to the God level can you know what the result will be when it is superimposed to more than 18 levels. Charlotte thought of his insight, which had been superimposed to X18 and transformed into omniscience, and suddenly had a slight understanding. But he still couldn't figure it out. If insight could transform, why couldn't the light agility technique? If this kind of description of being caught between two sides appeared in the online novels he recited, there would definitely be a lot of readers shouting, the author ate the setting. Of course, there would also be real readers leaving comments to criticize, the dog author must have been confused when writing, he must have stayed up all night playing Black Monkey last night. Well, the main point is to humiliate him to the extreme. Charlotte doesn't have many friends in Fars, and most of them are women. When she is with Julian and Ben Landmark, she is relatively relaxed. The three of them casually chat about the recent war situation, Zimmerman, and the situation of various countries. To be honest, the current situation of several empires is not very good. Fars is the worst, followed by Byron. Ingrama is better than these two countries, but because they are island countries, they didn't get much advantage when the Black Phoenix was divided, so the whole country is very angry. Charlotte had dinner with two friends and ordered a few cups of tea. Suddenly, he thought of his land battleship and Centurion, and thought to himself, if I use these things myself, I can't even break even on the cost. If I can sell them, I'll make a profit. Aren't Julian and Ben Landmark the best salesmen? He snapped his fingers, and a magic mirror opened. Charlotte smiled and said, recently in Mecklenburg, a man named William Triton invented two gadgets. The land battleship is too big, so I can't carry it here, but I can give you one Centurion each. The two alloy Centurion horses stepped out of the magic mirror with a clatter of their hoofs. Their empty bellies, the solid shields erected in front, the shooting stands hanging on both sides, and the rifles hanging behind the solid shields, made Julian and Ben Landmark know immediately what these things were used for. Although both of them were already saints, they were still happy to see such a battlefield weapon. Julian said, this thing can be used as a means of transportation. Julian was promoted to saint and could fly, but saints did not fly all the way for long distances. The energy consumption was too great and it was easy to die when encountering enemies. Ben Landmark also thought this thing was very interesting and thought to himself, if it were not saint, and there were no rare objects for storage, this thing could not only be used to travel, but also to transport some supplies. Well, it's not bad for fighting, it's much more useful than a warhorse that gets angry easily, and it has a high tolerance for force. Both of them accepted the gifts without hesitation. Charlotte did not say another word. The most brilliant sales pitch should not reveal the vulgar smell of money. Just as Charlotte sold the two Centurions, she heard a laugh and a voice saying, Lord Charlotte Mecklen. Now that you are in Shell City, why don't you come to see me first? His Royal Highness the Crown Prince of the Lionheart Dynasty, Brunhild Asa, walked into the restaurant calmly. Chapter 600, The Evil Gods Come Out in Full Force. Charlotte's good friends from various empires suddenly gathered together in this small restaurant. Although the Crown Prince of the Lionheart Dynasty, Brunhild Asa, was of noble status, neither Julian nor Ben Landmark seemed to be cramped. After all, their status was the top in their respective countries. Antonio, who had a similar status to Ben Landmark, was originally just the son of a count, but now he is the crown prince of Fars. Well, this is not common. Although Charlotte did not think that he had a very good relationship with the crown prince, the Lionheart dynasty had always been the most friendly country to him, and even the Fars royal family before Brittany ascended the throne had a more cordial attitude, so he had to express his feelings, stood up, and gave the crown prince a big hug. Brunhild smiled slightly and responded to Charlotte, saying, "This war may last for a long time. Our four empires must work together sincerely to withstand the attacks of the evil gods." Julian was slightly surprised and asked, "Are the other evil gods also ready to move?" Brunhild nodded slightly and said, "Lord Boraz has already used secret techniques to predict that this time the evil gods of the New World will come out in full force, and several saints sent by the Lionheart dynasty saw more than a dozen huge monsters near the Agulhas Sea, floating in the sea, and heading towards the Old World." This news was so shocking that Ben Landlock's face immediately became solemn. Charlotte couldn't help asking, "Your Highness Brunhild, aren't the evil gods of the New World fighting? Why did they suddenly unite?" Brunhild shrugged and said, "How should I know about this kind of thing? Probably no one in the human world knows why the evil gods suddenly fought and why they came across the sea. I do have a small guess. The evil gods may have gone too far, forcing the people of the New World to live and move back to the Old World. The evil gods are unwilling to give up these humans. After all, humans are the food in the eyes of the evil gods. So they follow these immigrants from the New World." Julian and Ben Landmark nodded slightly. They both felt that what Brunhild said made sense. Charlotte pondered for a moment. She always felt that the evil gods suddenly fought each other, and even the labyrinth evil god Agniras fell. There must be a powerful reason. It is even more incredible that these evil gods can give up fighting and cross the sea. There must be a reason. Just hunting humans cannot explain many things. However, Brunhild's guess is the most logical. Even if Charlotte doesn't think this may be the truth, she can't find a reason to refute it. With Brunhild, Charlotte suggested finding another place and suggested going to her mirror world for a small gathering. The other three agreed immediately. Charlotte brought the most important young people from the three empires and stepped into his mirror world. His mirror world, at least tens of thousands of mirrors, can perfectly reproduce at least 12 cities. Even the top cities in the Old World, such as Strasbourg, can reproduce at least a dozen streets. Charlotte brought the three back to 58 Champs-Élysées. 58 Champs-Élysées in the mirror world. Julian and Brunhild both knew this place, because in Anne Mecklen's novels, there are often two addresses. One is 58 Champs-Élysées, and the other is 221B Baker Street, Val d'Oise. Ben Landmark doesn't read novels very often. The address he is more familiar with is 698 South River Street, Severns, Charlotte's residence in Breton. In the mirror world, it was much more comfortable than in the city of Chelles. Charlotte copied the entire Élysée pastoral street, and even the streets were bustling with people, just like the outside world, but these pedestrians were only bubbles and could not make any response. Charlotte took out a coffee in the mirror world, made a cup for everyone, and said, "The news brought by Brunhild is really shocking. If the evil god invades the old continent in a large scale, we can't win this battle without the support of the 9 gods." But Charlotte remembered what the Serpent of Destiny had said. He felt that the 9 gods might not be able to split themselves to help, but there was no need to say such discouraging words. It would not help, but would affect the mentality of resistance. Brunhild nodded and said, "Indeed, without the support of the righteous gods, we can't win this battle. But fortunately, the 9 righteous gods always stand on the side of mankind. This time is not a civil war among humans. We will definitely get the support of the 9 righteous gods. It's just that we don't know when they will send down their divine glory without support." Julian and Ben Landlock have different mindsets. The former is a blood clan, and the latter actually has some problems with his faith. It's not Ben Landlock who has problems, nor is it the Landmark family. It's the faith of the entire Anglima that has problems. The 3 islands of Anglima have been conquered 7 times and unified 3 times. People who crossed the sea from various countries in the old continent have established more than 20 kingdoms. Now the Anglima Empire is the Red Dragon dynasty established by Duke Guillaume, the founding Grand Duke of Fars, who led his soldiers across the sea. The Red Dragon Emperor of this generation is Alfred Guillaume XV. Well, the god worshipped by the Anglima royal family and most nobles is the god of red dragons, Chinatinius Guillaume. However, no one knows whether this red dragon god exists or ascends to god. Everyone only knows that he is the ancestor of the Guillaume family. In this regard, in fact, the New World is also full of evil gods, but they are suppressed by the 9 righteous gods. Charlotte, as the god of the Serpent of Fate, cannot answer this question. With the addition of Brunhilde, they have more topics to talk about. They have been chatting for 4 or 5 hours, drinking a lot of coffee, beer and fruit wine, and then they all say goodbye. Brunhilde, as the crown prince of Lionheart, cannot be missing for too long. Julian and Ben Lanmaroc also have their own responsibilities. Charlotte sent them out and did not return to the mirror world, but went directly back to the military station in Fars. Charlotte's status and position are extraordinary, so naturally someone arranged the best accommodation for him, but the city of Cher was not big. Even if the entire city was requisitioned as a battlefield for the war with the immigrants from the New World, the living environment would not be improved. Charlotte occupied a grocer's shop. Most of the things in it had been taken away by the owner. Most of the remaining worthless goods were also taken away by Fars's soldiers. The rest were things that could not be moved and were worthless. Although it had been cleaned, the room still had a strange smell. Charlotte was not used to it. He had been on the battlefield for many years and had lived in many worse places. Early the next morning, an unexpected visitor appeared. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.